Chapter 88. This young man was in gushing spring tear. Ling Han's eyes narrowed. This man was only 23 or 24 years old, yet he had already broken through to gushing spring tear, and had even reached the peak of the first layer. In Rain Country he could definitely be called a genius. Could it be Feng Yan? In the vicinity of Deyuan City, if he had any enemies, then it could only be Feng Luo. He had suffered at his hands twice. Could it be that this guy had managed to invite his elder brother back? No, Feng Yan was said to be in the third layer of gushing spring tear. However, this man was too domineering. Obviously, he had barged his way in, and when he was stopped, he casually attacked and injured others. Young Master Han, this man said he wanted to see Lady Lu, and barged his way in. A few of our brothers tried to stop him, but were killed by him. One of the followers following behind the young man immediately said to Ling Han, his face filled with grief and indignation. Ling Han could not help but be angered. Barging in was already arrogant enough, and he actually killed others. This guy actually dared to be so lawless just because he was in gushing spring tear. Go invite Yutong out for me, the young man said to Ling Han, as if ordering a servant. Ling Han looked at him and said darkly, "You killed my men. So what? They're just some lowly dogs, so what if 1,000 or 10,000 of them died?" The young man said indifferently. Instantly the others were filled with righteous indignation, wanting to kill this guy 100 times with their gazes. Ling Han humphed and said, "In my eyes you're worse than a dog." The young man was startled, then laughed loudly and said, "A mere 5th layer poly actually dares to insult me. Ha 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 ha, you probably don't know who Hu Bo am? I don't care who you are." Ling Han leaped out, and with a ding his sword was unsheathed. The sword shot out as fast as lightning. "How dare you?" The young man who called himself Hu Bo instantly looked furious. He opened his right hand, and his origin power formed a golden palm, grabbing towards the sword. Ling Han's right hand shook, and 5 flashes of sword chi shot out. Swoosh 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 swoosh. 6 swords slashed out simultaneously, and the giant origin power hand was instantly sliced into pieces. Ling Han continued forward, his long sword piercing straight towards Hu Bo's throat. 5 flashes of sword chi. Hu Bo couldn't help but let out a startled cry. He sent out another palm strike, and another large hand of origin energy shot out, blocking Ling Han. He couldn't help but sneer and say, "I really didn't expect that a tiny gray cloud town would have a genius who formed 5 flashes of sword chi. And you're clearly only at the 5th level of poly, but your strength is comparable to the 9th level. Your combat ability should be 13 stars, right? What combat capability?" The people who followed him in were all confused. They had never heard of this term before. "Humph, but in front of me, no matter how high your combat ability is, it's useless." Hu Bo shook his head. "The gap between us is too great. If I go all out, I can kill you in one move." He paused for a moment, then continued, "I cherish talent, so I'll give you a chance to live. As long as you become my subordinate, not only will I spare your life, but I'll also bestow upon you a peerless divine technique." If Lu Yutong heard this, she would definitely laugh her head off. Who was Ling Han? He could casually take out a heaven-grade cultivation technique. What kind of cultivation technique would you take out to be worthy of being called a peerless divine technique? "Kneel and accept your death, and I can grant you a quick death," Ling Han said tit for tat. Hu Bo was enraged and said, "Brat, being arrogant because of your talent is not a good thing. Since you insist on seeking death, then I'll grant you your wish." He took the initiative to attack. As his hands moved, his attacks were like waves, and his battle prowess had increased greatly compared to before. However, it was still only 1 star. Of course, this 1 star was relative to gushing spring tear. Ling Han was unafraid. His battle prowess indeed couldn't reach the level of 1 star of gushing spring tear, but his defense was awesome. The body of Dead Tree allowed him to withstand powerful attacks without being injured, and the indestructible Heaven Scroll allowed him to instantly heal wounds, which was enough for him to fight. The two of them clashed, and sword chi soared into the sky, origin power overflowing. It can't be. Young Master Han is actually so powerful that he can fight against an elite of gushing spring tear. That's nothing, didn't young Master Han just kill one a few days ago? But that old guy just broke through, so he definitely isn't as powerful as he is now. Everyone discussed animatedly. all shocked by Ling Han's strength. He was obviously only in the 5th layer of Poly, yet he could fight against an elite of Gushing Spring Tier. It was practically unbelievable. However, Gushing Spring Tier was Gushing Spring Tier after all. After a few exchanges, not only was there blood at the corner of Ling Han's mouth, the skin all over his body was cracked, and blood seeped out. And this was because he had cultivated the body of dead tree, or else under such attacks, even his bones would have been shattered. Regarding this, everyone only felt deep admiration and worship. There was a difference of a whole tier between them, and yet Ling Han could still fight to such a state. If the two of them were at the same tier, it was very likely that Ling Han would be able to kill his opponent in a single move. Ling Han's condition was far from as bad as it seemed. With the circulation of the indestructible Heaven Scroll, the wounds in his body healed extremely quickly. Not only did his battle prowess not weaken, it instead became even stronger with the help of Lone Wolf's blood. After fighting for so long, he had already seen through most of his opponent's attacks, and there were practically no secrets left. Xiao, he suddenly struck out with his sword, and 5 flashes of sword chi shot out like a stroke of God, heading straight for Hu Bo's chest. Hu Bo was greatly shocked. Although there were flaws in each of his moves, how could a martial artist of element gathering tier be able to break through all of them? Yet this was the truth. Ling Han's sword had pierced right through the flaws in his moves and stabbed towards him. In a moment of desperation, he could only raise his hands to protect his chest. A spurt of blood shot out, and a wound appeared on his right palm, dripping with blood. The two of them had been fighting for so long, and Ling Han had finally managed to win back some ground. While the surrounding people all cried out in surprise, appearing to be extremely excited. Don't say that Hu Bo was only struck once and suffered a small loss, but the crucial thing was that he was in Gushing Spring Tier. A mighty warrior of Gushing Spring Tier was actually wounded by a poly martial artist. No matter where this was, it could be considered a magnificent feat. Hu Bo, on the other hand, had a sinister expression on his face. The sword that entered his flesh didn't injure him, and he only lost a bit of blood. However, he hated Ling Han to the bone. A trifling commoner from the desolate border actually dared to injure him, the 7th young master of the Hu family, one of the capital's 8 great influential families. If news of this got out, would he still have the face to raise his head in his circle of friends? Moreover, Ling Han's talent was really too terrifying. If he was really allowed to grow into Gushing Spring Tier, just how strong would he be? Must not be left alive. Hu Bo truly wanted to kill. Although he had wanted to kill Ling Han before, it was like a human swatting a mosquito to death. He did not take it to heart at all. But now, he truly wanted to kill Ling Han. He was going to go all out. He slowly drew his sword and said, "You do have some strength, but this is as far as you can go." Because he was in Gushing Spring Tier, he could use black-grade martial arts techniques. Chapter 89. Hu Bo drew his sword. He had a noble status and was of the highest status below the imperial family of Rain Country, but now he was actually wounded by someone. This was something that his dignity could not accept no matter what, and he wanted to kill this future king. 5 flashes of sword chi could be considered strong even among king tiers. You can't kill me today and you won't be able to kill me in the future. You will only die by my hands. Ling Han said darkly. From the moment Hu Bo started a massacre in the Ling family, it meant that this person's fate was already decided, and even his father couldn't change it, because this was the person he wanted to kill. Hu Bo, what are you doing here? Xiao, a figure flashed and Lu Yutong appeared. She was originally studying the 3rd level of 3 mysterious arts, but when she heard the commotion become louder and louder, she finally realized that something was wrong, and immediately jumped out. Her pretty face was filled with anger, because when she saw that Ling Han was covered in blood, her heart involuntarily tightened, and then a strong killing intent rose up. Anyone who harmed Ling Han was unforgivable. However, this Hu Bo was the 7th young master of the Hu clan, and his status was similar to hers. Moreover, he was stronger than her, so she couldn't be rash, or she might cause Ling Han's death. This was something she was even more unwilling to do. Yutong. Hu Bo immediately retracted his killing intent, smiled and said, "You left for a few months, and I was very worried about you, so I specially came to take you back. I don't need you to meddle in other people's business." Lu Yutong said coldly, pointed at the door and said, "You can get lost. Yutong, you can't have fallen for this brat, right?" Hu Bo's eyes swept over, and when he looked at Ling Han, his gaze was filled with jealousy. "Then this brat is dead for sure. You dare to take a step forward and try." Lu Yutong stood in front of Ling Han, her pretty face icy cold. "Humph, don't tell me you've really been smitten by him?" Hu Bo was so angry that he was about to go crazy. He and Lu Yutong were both disciples of the 8 great clans of the imperial capital, and in order to not be oppressed by the imperial family, the 8 great clans would often form alliances through marriage. After Lu Yutong displayed her great talent in martial art, the other 7 aristocratic families were very interested in marrying her. Hu Bo was one of the pursuers. He was also very satisfied because Lu Yutong was not only talented in martial art, but she was also one of the twin beauties of the imperial city. Which man did not want to marry her? Never would she have thought that she would be captivated by a wild boy after going out for a spin. A mere country bumpkin. "I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill this little bastard," he roared, leaping toward Ling Han. "Impudence!" Lu Yutong moved to meet him. Hong, the aura of gushing spring tear exploded. Hu Bo exclaimed in surprise, a look of surprise on his face. "Gushing spring tear? You've broken through to gushing spring tear?" He could not help but be surprised. Though everyone knew that Lu Yutong had outstanding talent in martial art, she would only be able to break through to gushing spring tear after she was 20 years old. Moreover, a few months ago, Lu Yutong was only in the 8th layer of Poly. Logically speaking, it would already be very difficult for her to reach the peak of the 9th layer of Poly by now. If she wanted to break through to gushing spring tear, she would need at least 1 or 2 years of accumulation. However, power could be forcibly increased through alchemical pills, but aura could not be faked. This was definitely gushing spring tear, and she had just broken through not too long ago. Genius, truly a genius. "Yutong, I've wronged you," he quickly said. Lu Yutong was able to break through to gushing spring tear in such a short time. So how could she have had the time to talk about love? She must have had some fortuitous encounter here, and had been working hard to break through, which was why she had stayed here. "Get lost." Lu Yutong ignored him and raised her palms, launching a terrifying attack. The symbol of gushing spring tear was origin power taking form. She clapped her palms together, forming one large hand after another of origin power that pressed down on Hu Bo. Hu Bo felt that he was in the wrong, so how could he dare to take the attack head-on? He only continued to dodge, begging for mercy. However, he was in the peak of the 1st layer of gushing spring tear, so his power was much higher than Lu Yutong's. Moreover, Lu Yutong had just broken through, so she could not use her own power skillfully, so he could naturally deal with her with ease. More importantly, gushing spring tear cultivators could cultivate black-grade martial arts techniques, but Lu Yutong had just broken through, so how could she have had the time to cultivate? It was even more impossible for her to pose a threat to Hu Bo. "Yutong, calm down. I'll leave, alright? I'll come find you when we return to the Imperial City." Hu Bo retreated, but before he left, he gave Ling Han a cold look and said, "Brat, don't think that you can get the moon from the pavilion closest to the water. Yutong is not someone you can have delusions about, or else I'll tear you into pieces." Without waiting for Lu Yutong to react, he leaped, and was already far away. Lu Yutong chased after him for a few steps before giving up. Hu Bo's speed was much faster than hers. "I'm sorry," she said apologetically as she walked to Ling Han's side. She allowed him to come to the Ling family and start a massacre, but she had not been able to take him down. "No need to be sorry, that guy is mine." Ling Han humphed coldly. Presently, he indeed did not have the ability to kill Hu Bo, but he would definitely not wait too long. Lu Yutong knew that Ling Han was a man of his word, and hurriedly said, "Hu clan is one of the 8 great clans of the Imperial City. Their power is not inferior to our Lu clan, and they have an elite of spiritual pedestal tier watching over them. You definitely cannot be impulsive." Ling Han had already guessed that Hu Bo's identity was definitely not ordinary, or else he would not have the right to pursue Lu Yutong. He nodded, smiled and said, "Am I that kind of impulsive person?" Lu Yutong could not help but mourn for the Hu clan. Although Ling Han was currently only in Poly tier, his talent in martial art was 100 times stronger than her own. Added with his achievements in alchemy, The Hu clan had indeed made a great enemy this time. Although the Ling family still had many things to do, Ling Dongxing forcibly chased Ling Han out of the clan and ordered him to immediately report to Huyang University. Ling Han thought for a moment. He indeed could not be of much help, so he set off. He and Lu Yutong brought Ling Zixian and Hu Niu with them. However, Ling Zixian's parents had both been killed by the Cheng family in the previous massacre. So when Ling Han arrived at the imperial city, he still had to ask someone to help take care of the two little girls. Now, Hu Niu had gradually gotten used to eating cooked meat, but she was still only interested in meat. She did not touch rice or vegetables. However, she was now especially clingy towards Ling Han. Whenever she had time, she would lean against him like a little kitten, resting her little head on his knee. However, this was not because she had retracted her wild nature, because she was still extremely fierce towards other people. However, because of her relationship with Ling Han, she had become more amiable towards Lu Yutong and Ling Zixian. At least, she no longer tried to bite the two of them. And Ling Han discovered to his surprise that this wild little girl seemed to never have enough to eat. No matter how much food he gave her, she would easily finish it off. And after eating some demonic beast meat, her cultivation level actually skyrocketed, and she very quickly broke through to the 4th layer of body refining tier. She obviously had not awakened her spirit base, and had never cultivated any kind of cultivation technique. This caused Ling Han to be extremely shocked. Power could not possibly appear for no reason. For example, the origin power in a martial artist's body was produced by refining the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. Hu Niu did not cultivate it, so it was obviously not through this method. Then it must be because of the food she ate. Could it be that this little girl could directly transform food into origin power? Once this guess came to mind, Ling Han could not help but be shocked. What kind of shocking ability was that? In order to prove this point, Ling Han and Lu Yutong hunted demonic beasts along the way, allowing Hu Niu to eat to her heart's content. As expected, the more she ate, the faster her strength grew. However, there was a limit to this, because her appetite was not a bottomless pit. When the 4 of them arrived at the imperial city, Hu Niu was already shockingly in the 6th layer of body refining tier. This was not as terrifying as Ling Han's cultivation speed, but it was already shocking enough, because she had not awakened her spirit base. Ling Han felt that he had picked up a treasure. Chapter 90. After so many days, Hu Niu managed to learn a few words. The words she said the most were meat, then kill, and then Ling Han. These 3 words only added up to 4 words. However, she at least knew that Hu Niu was her name. When this name was called, she would raise her head. She still did not like to walk on her feet, but Ling Han had a great influence on her, causing her to imitate him unconsciously. When the 4 of them arrived at the imperial city, the wild little girl finally managed to get used to walking on her feet, but when there was no one around, she would still move with all 4 limbs. That was extremely fast, like a ferocious tiger released from its cage. Her bad habit of not wearing clothes had not changed. A new set of clothes would be torn and tattered after a few days, giving Ling Han and Lu Yutong a huge headache. However, Ling Zixian was very envious, because she could always change into new clothes. To enter the city, they actually had to pay a fee of 1 silver coin. For people meant 4 silver coins. For Ling Han, this was a small matter, but when he thought about how many people were entering and exiting the city every day, it would add up to an astonishing sum. As expected, it was good to be an emperor. This road was opened by me, so the moment I entered, I had to collect money. After the 4 of them entered the city, it was just noon. They decided to eat first, then go to the academy to register. Meat. Hu Niu sat down seriously and began to drool. Ling Han did not look at the menu and said to the waiter, "Just serve whatever tastes good. But there must be plenty of meat." "Okay," the waiter replied and left. There were not many customers in the restaurant for now, but as the dishes were served, and it was nearing the time for most people to eat, the number of customers gradually increased, and the restaurant became more and more lively. Hu Niu did not use chopsticks, and simply stretched out her small hands to grab an entire chicken or duck, finishing it in 2 or 3 bites. Her appetite was shockingly good. "Aren't you afraid of dirtying your hands?" Ling Han shook his head. He had taught her who knew how many times, but the wild little girl always found chopsticks troublesome. Hunyao giggled and continued to eat enthusiastically. In comparison, Ling Zixian was much more refined. She took small sips and smiled without showing her teeth. She already had the air of a young lady from a wealthy family. What a beautiful daughter! An old voice rang out, causing Ling Han and Lu Yutong to turn their heads. This was an old man in his 60s. He was dressed in embroidered clothes, and 8 of his 10 fingers had rings on them. He looked extremely wealthy. His eyes were fixated on Hunyao and Ling Zixian, and they were practically shining. Are the two of you the little girl's parents? The old man walked over and asked. However, he immediately introduced himself. I'm Chen Yunxiang, the shopkeeper of Four Seas Enterprise. I have a bit of a reputation. Lu Yutong shook her head. Ling Han said to Chen Yunxiang, we're not their parents. We're just relatives. Ling Zixian very sensibly smiled at the old man and called him Grandpa. Hunyao, on the other hand, only cared about eating. To her, eating meat was the most important thing in this world. Chen Yunxiang seemed to be very fond of these two little girls and kept on talking, causing Ling Zixian to laugh incessantly. Hunyao, however, acted as if she had not heard anything. At first, Ling Han only thought that this old man was especially fond of children and did not pay much attention to it. However, the old man's gaze became more and more strange, as if he was a wolf that had set its eyes on a lamb cub. His eyes were so green that they were almost about to emit light. He finally realized that he had encountered an old lecher, and one that specifically targeted little girls. Come. Grandpa will give you a palm print. Xiang could not help but reach out to grab Ling Zixian's small hand, revealing the true face of a lecher. Pa! Ling Han reached out and grabbed the old man's wrist. His gaze sharpened and he said, Old man, you're already so old, yet you still refuse to behave. Xiang was not a martial artist, and being grabbed by Ling Han like this, he was instantly in so much pain that he cried out for his parents. Only when Ling Han flung him away did he stumble back. He raised his hand and shockingly, there were now 4 finger marks on his wrist, so green that they were about to turn black. His face was also a bit dark. He was wary of Ling Han, yet he was unwilling to give up on these 2 pretty little girls. He said, anyways, they're not your daughters, so why don't you name a price? A flash of killing intent flashed across Ling Han's face, and he said, Old lecher, say one more word and I'll kill you. Xiang still wanted to increase the price to move Ling Han, but when he saw the killing intent on the latter's face, he could not help but shudder. He did not dare to cause any more trouble, and hurriedly turned around and left. However, he would not give up so easily. He thought, since you don't know how to appreciate my kindness, I'll ask the people of Earth and Water faction to help me snatch these 2 little girls over. The old man stumbled away, and instantly caused the other customers in the restaurant to roar with laughter. Little brother, that old guy is a famous lecher, and he especially sets his eyes on little girls. If it were not for the fact that he has always only spent money, who knows how many times he would have been beaten to death. A customer who knew that old lecher said, shaking his head at the side. Ling Han did not take it to heart. The old man himself was not a martial artist, so his circle could only be that of mortals, and his power was limited. If Chen Yunxiang still did not know what was good for him just now, he would definitely not show any mercy. Hunyao ate very quickly, as if she was afraid that someone would snatch it from her. And when Ling Han and the others had already filled their stomachs, she was still eating, and her speed did not slow down in the slightest. This caused the customers in the restaurant to click their tongues in wonder. No matter how they thought about it, they could not understand how the little girl's stomach could hold so much food. Only when it was past 2 in the afternoon did the little girl pat her stomach in satisfaction, burrow into Ling Han's arms, and very soon fell asleep. She could eat and sleep. Ling Han stood up to pay the bill. A single meal actually cost over 1,000 silver coins, and at least 90% of it was in Hunyao's stomach, which showed how much of a wastrel the little girl was. Fortunately, Ling Han had killed Hang Zhan, Ma Lang, and the others, so he did not lack money. The 4 of them left the restaurant and continued on their way to Huyang University. After walking for a while, Lu Yutong said to Ling Han, there are 2 people following us. Ling Han nodded and said, I noticed them long ago. I just don't know if they are after our money or our people. If it was a person, a fierce glint flashed in his eyes. Needless to say, it was definitely that old lecher Chen Yunxiang. so don't blame him for being merciless. They're coming, Lu Yutong said in a low voice. At this moment, the two of them were walking into a secluded alley. There was not a single person in the surroundings, so of course this was done on purpose by Ling Han. Two sturdy men quickly walked up to Ling Han, and when they arrived at his side, one of them moved to hug Ling Zixian, while the other stretched out his hand towards Ling Han, wanting to forcefully snatch Hunyo from his arms. These two sturdy men were not martial artists, and were only slightly more sturdy than normal people. After all, out of 10 people, at most one would have a spirit base, so how could there be so many martial artists? Ling Han smiled, and not only did he not resist, he even raised his hand slightly, allowing the sturdy man to easily snatch Hunyo away. The sturdy man could not help but be startled. This kind of reaction was completely out of his expectations. Hunyo, however, was startled awake. She was like a wild beast, extremely vigilant. When she discovered that she was being hugged by an unfamiliar man, a fierce glint immediately appeared in her eyes. Chapter 91. The saber was so heavy, so why was it floating on the surface of the water? This was the wonder of spiritual tools. Some were as heavy as a mountain, while some were as light as a feather. What kind of martial intent had been fused with them? Ling Han did not pay much attention to it, but when his eyes swept over the saber and saw a mark on the hilt, his expression suddenly changed, and his whole body trembled. What's wrong? Lu Yutong and Li Sichan asked at the same time, and when they found that the other had synchronized with them again, the two girls both humphed at each other. They followed Ling Han's gaze, but when they found that the image of a naked girl was actually carved on the hilt of the saber, they both felt embarrassed, and could not help but spit. Men were indeed lustful, and even this young man Ling Han was no exception. Ling Han did not answer, and only stared at the saber as if there were flowers growing on it. In his last life, he had taken in a total of 4 disciples. 2 of them studied alchemy with him, while the other 2 studied martial arts with him. Of the 2 who studied martial arts with him, one was called Chan Rui Jing, and the other was called Zhang Yufeng. Of the 2, Chan Rui Jing was very serious and mature, while Zhang Yufeng was extremely lively, and boasted that he was a playboy. Zhang Yufeng had a strange hobby. He liked to carve the image of a naked girl on his weapons, and what he was most proficient in was saber techniques. This was the spiritual tool that Zhang Yufeng had used before. Although Ling Han had never seen this saber before, there would definitely not be many people in this world who would be able to carve the image of a naked girl on their saber. Moreover, they would have to be at least in the deity transformation tier, which was even rarer. He could almost be sure that it was only that freak of a disciple of his who had done so. Most importantly, Ling Han recognized Zhang Yufeng's drawing style. There was definitely no mistake about it. After 10,000 years, he naturally knew that his 4 disciples must have long since died of old age. Thus, after he had been reborn, he had not thought too much about it. Humans, after all, were born, grow old, get sick, and die. Everyone had their own destiny. But the weapon that his disciple had used had floated out from an underground river, and it was even together with the other spiritual tools. This caused Ling Han to have countless suspicions. Why would Zhang Yufeng's weapon be here? Ling Han focused his gaze. This saber was extremely badly damaged. The blade was completely chipped, and the head of the saber had been snapped in half. However, the material that this saber was made from was indeed of the highest quality. After 10,000 years, it was still as shiny as water, and there was not the slightest hint of rust. Judging from this, Zhang Yufeng should have experienced a terrible battle, and even his spiritual tool had been destroyed in the battle. And for Zhang Yufeng, who loved sabers as much as his own life, even if his saber was damaged, he would still carefully take it back and bury it. But now, it had floated out from the underground river. An ominous premonition suddenly surged up in Ling Han's heart. Could it be that Zhang Yufeng had met with a mishap? But it should be known that in his last life, not only him, even his 4 disciples were all alchemists. They had followed him, the strongest alchemist in history, and kept on taking alchemical pills to advance their cultivation levels. Their power had soared at a very fast pace. At that time, though Zhang Yufeng had not broken through to heaven tier, he had still reached deity transformation tier. Ling Han believed that if he was given another 100 or 200 years' time, breaking through to heaven tier would definitely not be a problem. Moreover, they are 4 fellow disciples. If Zhang Yufeng had met with a mishap of life and death, how could the other 3 just stand by and watch? Could it be that there was still a problem that the 4 of them could not deal with even if they joined forces? What had actually happened? Ling Han suddenly felt a strong urge. He wanted to enter the source of the underground river and see if he could find some clues. It's mine! It's mine! Everyone made their moves. Because this saber was severely damaged, the tool spirit had probably already been extinguished, and its power was not obvious. It was easily captured by the fishing net, and thus caused everyone to fight over it. This was a spirit tool, so even if it was damaged, it still had a very high research value. If one could study and discover a sliver of martial intent within it, then it would definitely allow one's own power to advance by leaps and bounds. Ling Han's eyes grew cold, and he said, "This saber is mine." Everyone paused slightly and then laughed loudly. Wasn't that right? A brat in element gathering tier actually dared to fight over the saber with them, elites of gushing spring tier? But laughing was laughing, and they immediately began to fight again. There were no rules here, and whoever managed to get their hands on the saber would get to keep it. Ling Han gave a long shout, and charged into the ring of battle. How dare you! Those elites of gushing spring tier were all furious. A mere martial artist in element gathering tier actually dared to fight over the saber with them? The world of martial arts had a strict hierarchy, just like alchemists. When a yellow-grade low-level alchemist met a yellow-grade medium-level alchemist, he would have to bow respectfully, as a junior should. And in front of gushing spring tier martial artists, even element gathering tier martial artists would have to act like obedient grandsons. They did not even have the right to stand together, what more to fight over the saber together. Get lost. One of them struck out with a palm, pushing towards Ling Han. Gushing spring tier martial artists were able to release their origin power, and their destructive power would increase explosively by an uncountable number of times. Thus, even if he had not used his full power, this attack was still extremely terrifying to Ling Han. Ling Han! Lu Yutong cried out in shock and hurriedly leapt out, wanting to save Ling Han. But she had just moved when Lu Buchang cut over and pressed down on her shoulder, forcefully restraining her. The 9th layer of gushing spring tier against the 1st layer of gushing spring tier. This was a completely one-sided battle. Yet Ling Han only stared at the saber, and circulated the indestructible heaven scroll with all his might. He used the exiting cloud steps and was as fast as lightning. Who? The gushing spring tier elite who had attacked had not thought that Ling Han would have such a terrifying explosive speed, and in his carelessness, he had not used his full power, so Ling Han instantly managed to escape. The others were restraining each other, and similarly did not take a junior in element gathering tier seriously. Instead, it allowed Ling Han to take advantage of this gap and get closer and closer to the saber. How dare you! After a moment of shock, these people were all enraged, and they all struck out at Ling Han. They were all in high-level gushing spring tier, and the weakest among them had reached the 7th layer. Now that they all attacked Ling Han at the same time, the impact was like a landslide or a tsunami, extremely terrifying. Pung! Ling Han was unsurprisingly sent flying. But what made everyone speechless was that this guy actually took the opportunity to grab the saber and hold it close to his chest. No matter, he's just a junior. Let's first determine the victor, and then decide who this saber belongs to, an elite of gushing spring tier said. Bullshit, competing in strength? Is that fair? Then I'll invite my clan's ancestor to compete in strength with you. How about first come, first served? Whoever manages to get the saber will get to keep it. This is something that everyone has agreed on. Why has it become a competition of strength to snatch it? We're only in gushing spring tier. And if it's a competition of strength, it's not us. Why don't we do it this way? We'll draw lots and it'll belong to whoever draws it. Everyone was making a ruckus, but they did not notice that Ling Han's body shook, and he had already slowly sat up. Everyone here had a powerful background, so in the midst of the battle, no one dared to make a killing move. And it was precisely because of this that Ling Han had the opportunity to snatch food from the tiger's mouth. But even so, under the simultaneous attacks of so many elites, he had still broken quite a few bones, and his internal organs had been damaged. His injuries were extremely severe. Normally speaking, he could only be carried away to recuperate from his injuries, and would not be able to walk for at least a dozen days. But there was still a drop of indestructible true fluid in his body. After cultivating the body of dead tree, one would be able to condense a drop of indestructible true fluid, and the use of indestructible true fluid was to heal injuries. No matter how severe the injuries were, as long as they still had a breath left in them, they would be able to recover instantly. This was the terrifying aspect of the indestructible heaven scroll. Chapter 92. Lu Yutong was a true disciple, but she wasn't as strong as Qi Yongyi. Why? Because she was a noble daughter of the Lu family. Firstly, the academy had to give her some face, and secondly, during the tournament at the end of the year, she could obtain a treasure from the family to temporarily increase her battle prowess. Thus, she easily maintained her status as a true disciple. Of course, this kind of backdoor could only be opened once by every noble clan. The other clansmen had to rely on their own strength to fight. Above the true disciples there were 3 core disciples. Core disciples were fostered by the academy as they were the strongest of the younger generation of Rain Country, representing the future level of martial art in Rain Country and the face of the country. To become a core disciple, Gushing Spring Tier was a must. A few hundred years ago, the strongest core disciple even reached Spiritual Ocean Tier. However, everyone had to leave the academy when they reached 30 years old because after 30 years old, they were considered to be in their prime. The current 3 core disciples were Qi Fengyun, the 3rd prince of Rain Country. Not only was he extremely talented, he also received the Rain Country royalty and Huyang University's focus on cultivation, so he was naturally very strong. He was 27 years old, but had already reached the 7th layer of Gushing Spring Tier. He was the strongest disciple of Huyang University, and was also known as the strongest prodigy of Rain Country. The second was Zhao Huan, a member of the Zhao clan of the 8 great clans. According to legend, there was a strange phenomenon where a golden light illuminated half of the imperial city. He was almost killed by the secret forces of the imperial family, who thought it could threaten the throne of the Qi clan. Thankfully, the current emperor was wise, and not only did he not harm Zhao Huan, he even conferred him the title of Golden Sky Lord. He was a marquis at birth, a first in Rain Country. After Zhao Huan awakened his spirit base, he also displayed terrifying talent in martial art. He was 23 years old at the 5th layer of Gushing Spring Tier, not inferior to Qi Fengyun. The third was Qin Yi, no surname. It was said that he was an orphan, found on the streets by the dean of Huyang University, and lost his right arm when he was young. On the path of martial arts, losing a right arm was practically a death sentence, and it was impossible for one to have any future prospects. However, Qin Yi still became a true disciple. His talent was truly terrifying. Qin Yi, 22 years old, in the 3rd layer of the Gushing Spring Tier, but it was rumored that his battle prowess soared to 7 battle stars, and even Zhao Huan had to be wary of him. Interesting. Ling Han thought inwardly as he waited for the recruitment teacher. He did not take Qi Fengyun and Zhao Huan to heart, but this Qin Yi did pique his interest. Could it be that he was also a genius with a god-level spiritual root? Otherwise, how could he advance so quickly and have such high battle prowess? Yes, are you a new student? The teacher finally walked out and looked at Ling Han with a strange gaze. He had never seen anyone sign up with a little girl in their arms. Yes. Ling Han drew out the certificate issued by the royal house of the Dayuan king, and handed it over to the teacher in charge of enrollment. The teacher was an elite martial artist in the 5th layer of Gushing Spring Tier, and was not to be underestimated. The teacher in charge of student recruitment took it, and couldn't help but reveal a look of surprise. He blurted out, "You are Ling Han." Ling Han scratched his head and said, "Am I very famous?" "Ha ha ha ha, with the prowess of the 4th layer of Pali, you defeated the 9th layer of Pali, and Qi Yongyi, whose battle prowess was not weak at all. Talent TSK, even the dean said that if you came to register, I should immediately take you to see him," the teacher in charge of enrollment said. Suddenly, his eyes widened, and he cried out in surprise, You broke through to the 5th layer of Pali." At first he was shocked, but then he remembered that Ling Han must have long since reached the peak of the 4th layer of Pali, and thus, after so many days, this guy managed to rush up to the 5th layer of Pali. With that thought, his shock lessened greatly. If he knew that a few months ago, Ling Han was only in the second layer of body refining tier. He would probably be so shocked that his jaw would drop. However, when he called out to her, Hunyo instantly woke up. She was very displeased, and bared her teeth at the teacher in charge of enrollment, showing her ferocious side. "Come, I'll take you to see the dean." The teacher in charge of enrollment waved at Ling Han. Although he was still very weak now in time, he might become the strongest core disciple and bring glory to Rain Country. Ling Han nodded and followed the teacher in charge of enrollment out, walking on the path of the academy. They soon arrived in front of a group of buildings. The people who lived here were all the higher-ups of the academy. However, the dean was not in his own courtyard, so the teacher in charge of enrollment told him to wait for a while he went to look for the dean who had disappeared to who knew where. Ling Han waited for a while, and then felt bored, so he began to walk around the area. He suddenly smelled a familiar scent, and his feet involuntarily moved, following the trail. This was a quiet and elegant courtyard. The door was ajar and was not closed. Ling Han pushed open the door and entered. Very quickly, he saw a girl sitting cross-legged in the courtyard. In her hand was a small alchemy furnace, and her entire right hand was spitting out flames. She was concocting the storm pill. The storm pill could increase a martial artist's speed in a short period of time, like a gust of wind blowing past. It was a very practical alchemical pill. However, this scent did not seem right. Ling Han wrinkled his nose and sniffed. Immediately, realization dawned on him. One of the supplementary ingredients was wrong. Although he could still successfully concoct the storm pill, it would affect the effect of the pill and increase the chance of the furnace exploding. He opened his mouth and said, "I advise you to stop immediately. Otherwise, in less than 3 breaths, the furnace will definitely explode." The girl did not pay any attention to him. This was the crucial time to concoct the storm pill, so how could she be distracted? In the second breath, the furnace lid was suddenly sent flying, and a bunch of fine debris sprayed out from inside. Although she managed to avoid most of it, her face was still smeared with some. The furnace had exploded. The girl finally raised her head and walked towards Ling Han, a hint of surprise in her eyes. How did this guy know that the furnace was about to explode? With her control, she would not be affected by external factors at all. Vermilion wolf bone is one of the ingredients that is most likely to cause a furnace to explode. Furthermore, if it's placed in the storm pill, it will also affect the quality of the finished pill. I don't know which idiot came up with this idea. Ling Han shook his head. "How dare you insult my master?" The girl flew into a rage, and her figure flashed as she leapt towards Ling Han. Her right hand struck out with a palm, and a flame appeared on it, causing the air around it to ripple. Poly 7th layer. Ling Han immediately saw through his opponent's cultivation base, and from the power of her palm, he could tell that her battle prowess had not even reached 7 stars. In truth, this was normal. Alchemists spent all their energy on alchemy, so where would they find the time to study martial techniques? This girl's cultivation base at the 7th layer of poly had most likely been raised by alchemical pills, so it was understandable that her battle prowess was low. When she stood up, Ling Han discovered to his surprise that this girl's figure was really slender. She was about as tall as he was, and she was as beautiful as a fairy. She was actually ridiculously beautiful, and was not the slightest bit inferior to Lu Yutong. "Hehe, did I say something wrong?" Ling Han said as he dodged. Meanwhile, Hunyo was squatting on one side, her face filled with excitement. She wanted nothing more than to pounce on him and take a few bites. Chapter 93. The woman snorted. As she continued to attack, she said, "This storm pill's recipe is incomplete. My master spent several years to complete it. That's a huge contribution to the alchemy world. You dare insult my master? Don't tell me you don't deserve a beating?" The storm pill is also lost. Ling Han couldn't help but frown. What was going on? Why were there so many pill recipes from his era that had been lost? The reversal pill, the storm pill, and the dark moon grass were actually used to refine the purple yuan pill, wasting them to such an extent. Logically speaking, even if the alchemy world hadn't made much progress in the past 10,000 years, it shouldn't have regressed to such an extent, right? He fiercely waved his palm and forced the other party back. He smiled and said, Based on what you've said, your master does indeed have some skill. However, if I can refine an even better storm pill, then what? Impossible. How could you possibly surpass my master? The woman didn't believe him at all. Let me try. At worst, we can fight again later, Ling Han said. All right, the woman agreed. Ling Han picked up the pill furnace that had fallen to the ground and said, "Prepare the medicinal ingredients for me." In one breath, he listed out over 20 medicinal ingredients. If it had been an ordinary person, they definitely wouldn't have been able to remember it. However, since this woman was an alchemist, she definitely had a powerful memory in this area. Very quickly, she retrieved the ingredients that Ling Han needed from the house. Ling Han sat down on the ground, his right hand holding the alchemy furnace. Hong, a ball of flame suddenly soared from his hand. A look of displeasure appeared on the woman's pretty face, because when alchemists concocted pills, their expressions were solemn, and they used the posture of sitting cross-legged. This was a kind of ceremony, but Ling Han was sitting on the ground, which was simply outrageous. However, when she saw that Ling Han had already started concocting the pill, she could only forcefully swallow the reprimand that was on the tip of her tongue. Disturbing someone else's pill concoction was a great taboo for alchemists, so she naturally would not knowingly violate it. She was very disdainful. It should be known that although her master did not belong to Tianyiji, his skill in alchemy was very high. He was a black-grade high-level alchemist, the same level as the highest person in charge of Tianyiji in Rain Country. Currently, he was the headmaster of the alchemy department of Huyang University. When Wu Songlin's name was mentioned, who wouldn't respectfully address him as grandmaster? Even the emperor of Rain Country had to be polite to him. This brat actually dared to call her master an idiot. If this were to spread out, he would definitely be beaten to death within 3 steps. Once Ling Han started concocting, his expression immediately changed, and the aura of a great grandmaster circulated around him. His left hand flew, throwing one medicinal ingredient after another into the pill furnace, while his right hand continued to spin the pill furnace. The flames were sometimes red, sometimes green, and sometimes white. The changes were extremely fast, causing people to be dazzled. The woman's disdainful expression quickly receded and was replaced by a look of shock. Her name was Li Si-chan, and she herself was a genius in alchemy, which was why she had been accepted as a disciple by Wu Songlin. She was very conceited, but when compared to Ling Han, she had to admit that his skills were far more experienced and skilled than hers. That kind of natural ease was as if he had immersed himself in alchemy for a few hundred years, and had already reached a level where he could control the pill furnace even with his eyes closed. This kind of achievement, not to mention her, even her master would be left in the dust. How was this possible? How was this possible? Wasn't he supposed to be a profligate young master? How could he have such shocking ability in alchemy? In just a short while, the medicinal ingredients in front of Ling Han had all disappeared, and there was a slight bead of sweat on his forehead. After all, the storm pill was a yellow-grade middle-level alchemical pill, and it was one of the more difficult ones to concoct. He could concoct it now, but because his cultivation level was a bit low, it was a bit difficult for him. Good disciple, you finally concocted the storm pill. It was at this moment that a pleasantly surprised voice was heard from the door. A short old man walked in, his face full of smiles, and in his hand was a food container. There was another old man behind him, and the two of them were standing side by side. If one looked closely, they would be able to see that both of them were wearing 3 silver badges on their chests. Black-grade high-level alchemist in the whole of Rain Country. There were only 2 black-grade high-level alchemists. One was the pavilion lord of Tianyiji, Fu Yuansheng, and the other was the headmaster of the alchemy department of Huyang University, Wu Songlin. It was these two. When Wu Songlin saw that the woman was standing, his old face was instantly filled with shock. He had never imagined that the person concocting the pill was not his own disciple. Fu Yuansheng also looked surprised. He knew that Wu Songlin had taken in a good disciple. He was only 18 years old, but had already become a yellow-grade middle-level alchemist. The storm pill was one of the most difficult pills to concoct among yellow-grade middle-level alchemical pills, and now it was actually another young man who was concocting it. This naturally caused him to be shocked. This old man Wu couldn't have taken in another genius alchemist disciple, right? Damn it, why was it that all the geniuses were snatched away by him? Hu Niu had originally been extremely bored and was lying on the ground sleeping. But when Wu Songlin entered, she immediately wrinkled her nose and squatted down. Her eyes were fixed on the food container in his hands, and with a sudden roar, she leapt out and pounced onto the food container. Ling Han's right hand moved continuously, and 3 different flames, red, green and white, shot out from his 5 fingers at the same time, which were then suddenly extinguished. 3-fire guide. This was a creative invention of his last life, and had revolutionized the world of alchemy. Not only could it increase the quality of alchemical pills, it could even save dead pills that would have exploded. Wu Songlin and Fu Yuansheng were both stunned, their eyes bulging out of their sockets and their mouths agape, looking as if they were about to explode from shock. Hu Niu took the opportunity to snatch away Wu Songlin's food container, immediately opened it, and began to enjoy it happily. Could this be the legendary 3-fire guide that has long been lost in history? To be able to explode 3 balls of flames of different temperatures at the same time, greatly increasing the effect of the completed pill, and even saving dead pills. This is a legend among legends, and I have always thought it to be a myth. It shouldn't be real, right? It's just an imitation. The 2 old men said one after another, their expressions filled with shock. Who? Ling Han exhaled through the alchemy furnace at Li Si-chan, and said, "Fortunately, I did not disappoint you. Have a look." Shua. The 2 old men rushed out at the same time, and began to fight over the furnace like 2 little children. They were both powerful warriors of spiritual pedestal tier, and their attacks were as fast as lightning, dazzling the onlookers' eyes. Li Si-chan was dumbfounded. These were the 2 most respected alchemists of Rain Country, and now they actually acted like little children. How could she believe her own eyes? Finally, the 2 old men stopped. One held the alchemy furnace, while the other opened the lid of the furnace, and carefully took out a vermilion-colored alchemical pill. This color, this smell. That's right, this is the real storm pill. Wu Songlin dug out a piece, put it into his mouth and tasted it. He could not help but look even more shocked and said, "This is definitely the real storm pill, and its effect has reached 12 stars, no 13 stars. What?" Fu Yuansheng instantly jumped up. Chapter 94. In the world of alchemy, if the quality of a completed pill reached the standard, then it would be rated as 10 stars. If the effect exceeded the standard, then it would be rated as 11 stars, 12 stars, and normally it would not exceed 20 stars. If the quality did not reach the standard, then it would be rated as 1 to 9 stars, and any pill below 1 star would be considered a useless pill, completely useless. Even if I concoct low-level alchemical pills, I can at most reach 12 stars. Fu Yuansheng exclaimed in shock. Li Si-chan's face was filled with disbelief. She could also be considered a genius in alchemy, or else she would not have been taken in as Wu Songlin's personal disciple. However, the majority of the completed pills she concocted were only 10 stars, barely passing. A small number were 9 stars and a small number were 11 stars. And the storm pill was considered extremely difficult to concoct among yellow-grade middle-level alchemical pills. For example, she had already concocted it for a month, but every time she concocted it, the furnace would explode. It was clear how difficult it was. For this kind of alchemical pill, as long as it could be concocted, it would be considered a success. Even if it was 3 or 4 stars, there would be a huge market for it. 13 stars would be fought over. This guy really did not boast. He really concocted the storm pill, and the quality of the completed pill was even higher than Wu Songlin's. The storm pill that Wu Songlin concocted was only 8 stars, at most 9 stars. Could it be that master was really wrong? Young man. Wu Songlin's eyes shone with a golden light. His expression was completely on par with Hu Niu's. In an instant, he dashed in front of Ling Han, grabbed his hand and said, "You used the 3-fire guide just now?" Ling Han nodded. Wu Songlin and Fu Yuansheng both inhaled sharply. This was something that only existed in legends. What did a young man who knew how to use the 3-fire guide mean? "Young man, take me as your master, and I guarantee that you will at least become an earth-grade alchemist," Wu Songlin immediately said. Hearing his words, Fu Yuansheng naturally understood that Ling Han had nothing to do with Wu Songlin at all. He hurriedly squeezed his way forward, and said, "No, no, no, take me as your master. I am the pavilion master of Tianji in Rain Country, and have countless resources in my hands. You can concoct whatever pill you want." "Bullshit. Old man Fu, you have to know that this is my Huyang University's territory. You're trying to steal from me?" Wu Songlin was instantly enraged. This youth was obviously a rare genius in the Tao of alchemy. Just by looking at the storm pill, he could tell that it was a 13-star alchemy pill. "What do you mean by dig into your head? You don't even know what this young man's name is, and you still say he's your man?" Fu Yuansheng snorted. Turning around, his face was full of smiles. "Young man, what's your name?" Li Sichan was completely stupefied. These two were the strongest alchemists in Rain Country. No matter which of them announced that they wanted to take in a disciple, it was guaranteed that there would be a line of people lining up from the east gate to the west gate of the imperial city. But now, the two of them were actually fighting over who wanted to take in Ling Han as their disciple, and had even almost gotten into a fight. How could she not be shocked? Moreover, she was even feeling a little jealous. "I am Ling Han said. "I'm a new student who has joined Huyang University this year. Did you hear that? This is a disciple of my academy." Wu Songlin was very proud of himself, and waved his hand at Fu Yuansheng. "I'm not going to drink with you today. You'd better hurry back to your Tianji. So what if he's a student of your Huyang University? There's no conflict with him taking me as his master." Fu Yuansheng did not mind at all, and continued to speak to Ling Han. "Young man, what do you say? This is my disciple. Old man Fu, do you want to fight with me?" Wu Songlin was seething with anger. "This disciple, I'm definitely going to fight for him." Fu Yuansheng was not to be outdone. "Are you going to ignore our friendship of more than 10 years? Pei, you're the one who insists on fighting with me." The two old men's necks were thick, and it looked like they were about to get into a fight. Master, you two can take him as your disciple together." Li Sichan interrupted. "That's right." The two old men were startled at the same time. Why hadn't they thought of such a simple solution? They both walked towards Ling Han. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, "I think the two of you are still unable to teach me. This, what a bold claim." Li Sichan was so shocked that her small mouth gaped open. Who were Wu Songlin and Fu Yuansheng? The two strongest alchemists of Rain Country were still unable to teach him? Although he had concocted a 13-star storm pill, the storm pill was only a yellow-grade mid-level pill after all. Wu Songlin and Fu Yuansheng also looked displeased. Although this young man was a genius, he was really too proud. This kind of person might shine for a while, but he would definitely not achieve too much. Ling Han smiled and said, "The two of you, we can discuss and compare notes with each other." These words of his were actually spoken very modestly. As the former alchemy emperor, not to mention that these two were only black-grade high-level alchemists, even earth-grade high-level alchemists would only be able to stand respectfully in front of him and listen to him respectfully. But Wu Songlin and Fu Yuansheng did not know this, and the displeasure on their faces became even stronger. Ling Han acted as if he did not see them, and began to speak casually, all of which were some general knowledge of alchemy. However, his current cultivation level had indeed dropped, and it was impossible for him to concoct high-level alchemical pills, but in terms of theoretical knowledge, who could compare with him? The two alchemists had been indifferent in the beginning, but they gradually became more cautious. Occasionally, they would also speak up to discuss, but as they spoke, they became the one asking for advice, and continuously asked Ling Han some difficult questions about alchemy. Li Sichan watched from the side, her face already numb from shock. This young man was obviously even younger than her, so how could he have such shocking understanding of alchemy? If one did not know him and did not hear his voice, anyone would think that he was an old alchemist. She also had shocking talent in alchemy, which was why Wu Songlin had taken her as a disciple. Moreover, she was extremely beautiful, and together with Lu Yutong they were known as the twin beauties of the imperial capital. The number of people who pursued her could line up several times around the imperial capital. But compared to the two of them, she was practically like an alchemy apprentice who had not even started. As she listened from the side, her admiration for Ling Han grew stronger and stronger, and she could not help but sigh. There were indeed geniuses in this world. If not for that, how could he possibly surpass her master in alchemy at such a young age? As expected, there is no such thing as advice from one's elders, and those who are capable are the teachers. Fu Yuansheng was the first to sigh. At first I had thought that young friend was arrogant and conceited, but I never thought that the arrogant and conceited one would be me. Young friend's understanding of alchemy has already far surpassed mine, and in future you will definitely become an earth-grade alchemist, or even a heaven-grade alchemist. After hearing young friend's words, I feel that the door to becoming an earth-grade alchemist is already wide open. If you completely understand young friend's understanding just now, you will definitely be able to step into the next level. Wu Songlin also sighed. He stood up, bowed deeply towards Ling Han and said, "Many thanks, young friend." "Many thanks, young friend." Fu Yuansheng also stood up and bowed towards Ling Han. Li Sichuan was completely numb. Because of the special nature of alchemists, these two could be said to be the most important people in Rain Country, second only to the Rain Emperor. But now they were actually bowing together towards a young man. This was a treatment that even the Rain Emperor had not enjoyed before. If word of this spread out, probably no one would believe it. Chapter 95. In these few days, Ling Han and the other two had all broken through. Lu Yutong had accumulated a lot of experience. She had 3 in absolute meridians in the first place, and coupled with 3 in mysterious art, the speed of her cultivation was naturally ridiculously fast. Now that she had obtained the 4 transformations pill, she naturally advanced even faster. Most importantly, the 4 transformations pill could help her break through to the second layer of the gushing spring tier. For the majority of people, the barrier between tiers was the most difficult, because as long as one was willing to put in the effort and cultivate diligently, or had enough alchemical pills, one could advance very smoothly from the early stage of any tier to the peak stage. But completing the breakthrough was a problem. Even if it was from the first layer of the gushing spring tier to the second layer of the gushing spring tier, this step was very difficult. Why were there so few powerful warriors of the spiritual pedestal tier in Rain Country? It was because they did not have enough comprehension of their tier, so they were all stuck in the spiritual ocean tier. And below the spiritual ocean tier, there was still a large number of people stuck in the gushing spring tier and element gathering tier. The 4 transformations pill could help martial artists gain comprehension of their tier. If this was known to others, it would be so shocking that their scalps would go numb. Lu Yutong was a smart person in the first place, and with the help of the 4 transformations pill, she herself was almost at the peak stage of the first layer of the gushing spring tier. After a few days of trying to break through, the conditions were naturally ripe, and she advanced a step further. She did not continue to increase her cultivation level, but instead worked hard to strengthen her foundation. After all, she had relied on alchemical pills to increase her cultivation level, and if she continued to be greedy, it would cause her foundation to become unstable, and she would not be able to reach a higher tier in the future. Ling Han had also taught her a set of 4 seasoned sword technique. This was a black-grade high-level martial arts technique, and probably even the Liu clan would not be able to obtain it. Perhaps only the imperial family would be able to obtain it. Thus, after Lu Yutong had broken through the day before yesterday, she had been studying the secrets of the 4 seasoned sword technique for the past 2 days. If there was anything she did not understand, she would ask Ling Han for guidance. Thus, her power had increased very quickly. An elite warrior of gushing spring tier asking for guidance on a martial arts technique of element gathering tier sounded extremely absurd. But Lu Yutong and Li Sichuan felt that it was only natural, and there was nothing out of place about it. Ling Han was too much of a monster. If he was said to be able to use a heaven-grade martial arts technique now, the 2 girls would probably only make an "of" sound, and then accept reality. Li Sichuan had also advanced from the 3rd layer of element gathering tier to the 4th layer of element gathering tier. Most alchemists were alchemists, and had always relied on alchemical pills to forcibly increase their cultivation level. Naturally, her body had a very strong resistance to alchemical pills. Thankfully, her cultivation level was still low after all, so this resistance to alchemical pills was not very strong. Thus, she had also advanced a small tier. Meanwhile, Ling Han had broken through to the 6th layer of element gathering tier. His cultivation level was still very low, but in terms of battle prowess it was extremely terrifying. 5 elements origin nuclei, 6 flashes of sword chi, indestructible heaven scroll, body of dead tree. All these added together caused his attack power to soar to 15 stars, and his defense was even stronger. It would not be an exaggeration to say that it could reach 20 stars. It's still not enough. Ling Han shook his head. Only by breaking through to Gushing Spring tier would he be able to use black-grade martial arts techniques, and the increase in battle prowess from black-grade martial arts techniques was definitely not something that yellow-grade martial arts techniques could compare with. He was sitting on a mountain of treasures, but could only sigh in vain. This kind of feeling made him very displeased. Lu Yutong, however, rolled her eyes at him. This guy had only been in the second layer of body refining tier half a year ago, but now he had already reached the sixth layer of element gathering tier, and he still complained that it was too slow. How were others supposed to live with him? They walked out of the tent and met up with the others. Yutong, so you've arrived long ago. A man immediately walked up to Lu Yutong when he saw her. It was Wu Bojian. When Lu Yutong saw him, she did not say another word, but directly drew her sword and thrust it forward. That day, in order to find her, Wu Bo had come to the Ling clan residence to cause a ruckus, killing and injuring quite a number of people, causing her to feel guilty all this time. Now it could be said that they had met again, and her eyes were burning with anger. How could she possibly hold herself back? Naturally, she attacked at the first instant. What? When Lu Yutong made her move, Wu Bo's expression immediately changed. Second layer of Gushing Spring tier. She was actually in the second layer of Gushing Spring tier. In all honesty, when he had seen Lu Yutong in Grey Cloud Town previously, she had only just broken through to Gushing Spring tier. But only half a month had passed, and she had already reached the second layer of Gushing Spring tier. This could no longer be described as a genius, could it? Take him for example. He had also received the full support of the clan, but now he was still in the peak period of the first layer of Gushing Spring tier. He would need at least another month before he could break through to Gushing Spring tier, but this was already something that had been greatly praised by the clan, and had been praised as a rare talent. But compared to Lu Yutong, he was completely an idiot. Under the furious attacks of an elite in the second layer of Gushing Spring tier, how could Wu Bo dare to be the slightest bit careless? He hurriedly drew his sword as well. At this time, if he held back even a little bit, he could very well lose. If he lost to the woman he was pursuing, then would he still have the face to see Lu Yutong in the future? Ding 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 ding, the two swords continuously clashed, and intense sparks flew. Logically speaking, an elite in the second layer of Gushing Spring tier should be able to crush an elite in the first layer, but Lu Yutong had just broken through, after all. Moreover, she had broken through with the help of alchemical pills, so her foundation was not stable, which naturally affected her battle prowess. As for Wu Bo, though the increase in his cultivation level could not be separated from the help of alchemical pills, he had been stuck at the peak period of the first layer for a very long time after all. Naturally, he had long since solidified his foundation. Thus, in this exchange, the battle prowess that the two of them displayed was about the same, and it was difficult to determine who was stronger in a short period of time. Isn't this the Pearl of the Lu clan? How could she be so strong? That's right, I remember that half a year ago she was only in the 8th layer of element gathering tier. Logically speaking, she would need at least 2 years to break through to Gushing Spring tier. But now she's actually already in the second layer of Gushing Spring tier. This is practically unimaginable. TSK. This delicate flower is really getting harder and harder to pluck. However, she's also becoming more and more likable. With such talent, TSK, this woman is mine. Bullshit, you think you're worthy. The surrounding people were all discussing fervently. They were either from the imperial family or from the other 8 great clans, and the power of every single one of them was no weaker than the Lu clan. Moreover, being able to be brought here meant that their power and talent were all top-notch, so they were naturally all proud of themselves. Lu Yutong's attacks continued for a long time, but she was unable to take down Yutong, and the fury in her heart grew stronger and stronger. She suddenly flicked her sword, and a powerful sword intent circulated around her, and her entire person became extremely solemn. 4 Seasons Sword Technique, Black-Grade High-Level Martial Arts Technique. This sword technique was divided into 4 parts, which respectively represented spring, summer, autumn, and winter. In truth, it could be said that it was 4 sets of sword techniques that combined into one sword formation. It would be best if 4 people used it simultaneously, as its power would be even greater. However, it was not impossible for a single person to use it at the same time. This required an extremely high level of control over the sword. One move after another, summer followed spring, autumn followed summer, forming a cycle of the 4 seasons, which was similarly powerful. Lu Yutong had only learned a few moves of the spring rain sword technique, so she naturally could not link the 4 seasons together to form the sword intents of spring rain, summer thunder, autumn wind, and winter snow. However, a black-grade high-level martial arts technique was still a black-grade high-level martial arts technique after all. Just one move alone was already extremely powerful. Shwa, the sword flashed coldly, and there were actually raindrops floating in the air, dancing along with the sword moves. It was a marvelous sight. The beauty was like a painting, and the sword moves were like the scenery, causing everyone to feel intoxicated. Even if there were some people who had set their hearts on the path of martial arts, they could not help but feel their hearts waver, intoxicated by Lu Yutong's elegance. The beauty was like jade, and the sword was like a rainbow, causing many people to want to recite poems and sing. One word, too beautiful, is even more refreshing. Chapter 96. All right. The 2 old men nodded at the same time. They were friends of many years after all, and though they argued fiercely before, they didn't want to damage their friendship. This was a solution to the problem. Here, this is my alchemy department's token. In the future, you can enter the alchemy department with this token. Wu Songlin handed an iron token to Ling Han. Old man Wu, this brat just came to the academy to report today. I'll take him to the martial arts department to register and arrange his accommodation, Lian Guangzhu said as he pulled Ling Han and ran. Lian Guangzhu dragged Ling Han and ran quite a distance before stopping and saying to the teacher, "Why did you let this brat run to old man Wu's place?" The teacher was very innocent. How would he know that Ling Han loved to run so much, running out of sight in just a short while? But he didn't dare to talk back to the headmaster, so he could only lower his head and admit his mistake. Thankfully, Lian Guangzhu was just venting his displeasure, and didn't really blame him. Good brat. Only in the 4th layer of Poly and defeated Qi Yongyi. His battle prowess should be about 12 stars, surpassing his tier by a whole 8 stars. Even that brat can't compare. Lian Guangzhu's eyes lit up as he mumbled, such a genius of martial art. How can he waste his time on alchemy? If Wu Songlin heard this with his understanding of Lian Guangzhu, he would definitely guess that the old man was thinking of something. Arrange a remote residence for him. Also, arrange a teacher without disciples for him. Don't let old man Wu find him. As expected, he was two-faced. The teacher couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat, and nodded hesitantly. This was the headmaster, so he obviously had to listen to him. But Wu Songlin was also the headmaster of the alchemy department, and a black-grade high-level alchemist at that. In Rain Country, his status was only below that of the Rain Emperor. If Wu Songlin blamed him, he could bear it. Lian Guangzhu naturally realized and said, "After you finish this, go and rest for half a year. Your monthly salary will be paid as usual." When the teacher heard this, he was instantly overjoyed. This way, he could avoid the limelight and also get a free salary, which was naturally the best. Which teacher should I look for? After Lian Guangzhu left, the teacher thought hard. I got it. He smiled. Oldemo. Oldemo. Ling Han carried Hunyo in one hand and carried a simple luggage in the other, which was just a change of clothes. The recruitment teacher said, "Old Mo's name is Mo Gao. He used to be a genius of our academy, but I don't know what possessed him, but he actually said that he wanted to create the #1 sword art in the world. As a result, his cultivation stagnated. If it weren't for the dean taking pity on him and accepting him as a teacher in the academy, anyway, the dean will teach you in person, so you don't have to worry about old Mo's cultivation." Ling Han was brought to an extremely remote place by the recruitment teacher. There were only a few scattered courtyards here, and it was really run down. The weeds on the side of the road had grown to waist height. It was likely that no one had lived here for a long time. Bang bang bang. The teacher went up to knock on the door. After a while, a voice came from inside. "Who is it?" "Oldemo, it's me," the recruitment teacher said. The two of them should be very familiar with each other. The door opened, and a man of medium build walked out. He should be less than 40 years old, but his face was covered with a beard. His hair was disheveled and he was slovenly. He looked like a man in his 60s or 70s. What's the matter? If there's nothing else, I'll go practice the sword, the man said. He was obviously a Mo Gao. I've brought you a student. The recruitment teacher pointed at Ling Han and said, He's called Ling Han. All right, I've brought him here, I'll be leaving now. His butt was on fire and he broke into a run, afraid that Wu Songlin would catch up to him. Otherwise, he would be in a difficult position. Ling Han looked at Mo Gao, and Mo Gao looked at Ling Han. For a moment, neither of them spoke. After a while, Mo Gao nodded and said, Since I'm a teacher here, I can't refuse the mission given by the academy. In the future, you can practice the sword with me. Okay. Ling Han did not mind. The courtyards nearby are all empty, so you can find one to stay in. Mo Gao turned and walked back. I won't close this door. In the future, you can come in by yourself, but do not disturb me when I'm practicing the sword. Ling Han shrugged and brought Hunyao to choose a place to stay. Needless to say, the courtyards here were all in tatters, and dust had accumulated all over the ground. He chose a slightly better courtyard and began to clean it up. It had to be able to accommodate someone, right? Hunyao was also helping, but she naturally only made things worse. She flopped around, causing dust to fill the air, and her little face to look like a dirty cat. Ling Han could not help but laugh loudly. After busying himself for most of the day, he had at least tidied up a clean room. Ling Han did not immediately go to find Lu Yutong, as he trusted that she would take good care of Ling Zixian. Is anyone there? A voice came from the door. Ling Han walked over and saw a teenager pushing a small cart. Inside was a bag of rice, some dried meat, and vegetables. Meat, meat, meat. Hunyao's eyes immediately lit up, and with a leap she pounced over, scaring the teenager so much that he fell on his butt. This was to deliver rations, and in the future he would have to cook his own meals. Ling Han smiled and walked over to pull the teenager up. He said, Is this food for a few days? 10 days, the teenager said. 10 days later, I'll deliver rations again. Ling Han shook his head and said, Not enough, 1 day is more like it. 1 day. The teenager was shocked and looked Ling Han up and down. He did not think that Ling Han would have such a big appetite. It's fine, just send it over. Money is not a problem, Ling Han said with a smile. The academy did not set a limit on how much you can eat, but can you really finish it? The teenager did not dare to believe it. Ling Han did not explain. Actually, the one who could eat wasn't him but Hunyao. After the teenager unloaded the food from the cart, he pushed the cart and left. Hunyao immediately jumped around Ling Han, looking impatient. Don't rush, it's not night yet, Ling Han said with a smile. Hunyao was instantly displeased and pouted, baring her teeth at Ling Han. Ling Han laughed and said, We won't cook today. Let's go stroll around the city. We have to buy new blankets and other things and prepare a few more clothes. After strolling, we'll go eat. Meat, 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 meat. Hearing the word eat, the little girl immediately started jumping again, her displeasure completely swept away. Ling Han brought the little girl out. He had already applied to Lian Guangzhu that the little girl could stay with him in the future. Otherwise, if she were to stay outside the academy, he really did not know who would be able to take care of her. He held Hunyao's hand, letting the little girl get more used to walking on 2 legs, and not always thinking of crawling on the ground. Come quickly, Zhu Wujiao is challenging Nan Gongji. They had not even walked out of the academy when they heard a student rushing around, looking extremely excited. Chapter 97. Ling Han couldn't help but be tempted and followed the crowd. There were more and more people, all discussing the battle between Zhu Wujiao and Nan Gongji, allowing Ling Han to quickly understand the two's information. Zhu Wujiao and Nan Gongji were both normal disciples of the academy, but Nan Gongji's ability ranked in the top 10, and he was qualified to challenge for the position of true disciple at the end of the year. Zhu Wujiao was slightly inferior, but his ability ranked in the top 20 among normal disciples, which was quite good. Why is Zhu Wujiao still fighting to the death with Nan Gongji? It can't be helped. Who asked senior brother Nangong to abandon senior sister Han Wan to save his own life when he was training? Senior sister Han Wan was Zhu Wujiao's lover, so how could he not go crazy? I heard that senior sister Zhu Wan was actually killed by senior brother Nangong. She was hit by his sword, so she fell behind and was forced to fight to the death with the silver light beast, buying time for senior brother Nangong to escape. Zhe, don't say such things. Be careful, Nangong Ji won't make trouble for you. He's the fifth young master of the Nangong clan, and his third brother, Nangong Xing, is a true disciple with the cultivation of the third spring of the gushing spring tier. But Zhu Wujiu is really infatuated. He obviously knows that the Nangong clan is not to be trifled with, but he still challenges Nangong Ji to a bloody battle every year. Last year, he was severely wounded and almost lost his life. Who would have thought that he'd challenge Nangong Ji again this year? Unfortunately, Zhu Wujiu's talent is not very high, and he only has a low-level Earth-grade spirit base. Moreover, his family is poor, and he can't get any extra training. The gap between him and Nangong Ji will only grow. Someone was talking about the grudge between Zhu Wujiu and Nangong Ji. When Ling Han heard it, he couldn't help but feel a bit curious about Zhu Wujiu. The crowd soon arrived at the academy's training field. There was already one person standing there, and the others very consciously did not step in. In Huyang University, sparring was allowed. As long as both parties agreed, they could fight in the training field. In principle, they would try to be as merciful as possible, but if they really couldn't hold back, they wouldn't be punished too severely. After all, swords had no eyes. However, if they intentionally hurt someone, the academy would severely punish them. For example, if one side had already admitted defeat, fainted, or completely lost the ability to fight, but the other side still continued to attack, this was a forbidden behavior. Ling Han walked towards the man in the training field. He was about 25 or 26 years old and carried a long sword on his back. He was tall and slender, but his looks were not handsome. However, his eyes were very sharp. Ordinary people probably wouldn't dare to look him in the eye. Why isn't Nangong Ji here yet? He was challenged, so of course he would put on airs. By the way, how many times has Zhu Wujiu challenged Nangong Ji? This is the 5th time, right? It's only been 4 years. This guy's willpower is really scary. Every time he gets seriously injured, he almost dies, but he always clenches his teeth and holds on. I can't help but admire him. Everyone spoke as they waited, expressing their sympathy and admiration for Zhu Wujiu. A smile appeared on Ling Han's face as he thought to himself, I really didn't expect to meet someone with a special constitution. His body is glowing with a faint silver light, and others said that he didn't die even after being seriously injured 4 times, and that he can quickly recover. This person should be from the Silver Moon clan, right? The Silver Moon clan was born with the Silver Moon Constitution, which was a constitution with powerful recovery abilities. It could be said to be a kind of healing panacea, and it was precisely because of this that the number of people from this clan was pitifully small. They were hunted down and refined into a panacea. I thought that after 10,000 years this clan had gone extinct. I didn't expect to meet one today. Fine, for the sake of the Silver Moon King, I'll help him out. 10,000 years ago, Ling Han had entered the Silver Moon clan's territory in order to gather medicinal ingredients. He had received the warm hospitality of the Silver Moon King, the Silver Moon clan's leader at the time. However, the Silver Moon clan had been exterminated not long after that. Ling Han's cultivation level was still too low at that time, and he was unable to help them at all. Later on, when he entered the Heaven tier, those villains had also died of old age. That was one of Ling Han's regrets. Ha ha ha, Zhu Wujiu, how many times do you have to fail before you understand that you will never be a match for me? A youth strode over, a powerful aura emanating from his body. 9th layer poly and at the peak. If he did not have such strength, how could he have been able to sit in the top 10 of the normal disciples? In comparison, Zhu Wujiu was much inferior, only at the 7th layer poly. However, everyone knew that cultivation level did not represent battle prowess. For Zhu Wujiu to be able to rank in the top 20 meant that his battle prowess far exceeded his cultivation level. Enough nonsense, make your move. Zhu Wujiu immediately drew his sword and formed a sword seal. Nangong Ji's face was filled with arrogance. He also formed a sword seal, which meant that both sides had agreed to begin this battle. Zhu Wujiu charged out, his sword slashing out, cold light flashing. Nangongji did not care at all. He was an expert in the top 10, and compared to him, what was Zhu Wujiu? Ding 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 ding. The two of them clashed fiercely, and Nangongji clearly had the absolute upper hand. He was extremely relaxed, and he was even mocking Zhu Wujiu, trying to lower Zhu Wujiu's morale. But in truth, he was very wary of Zhu Wujiu. In the previous 4 battles, he had dealt a fatal blow every time. Though Zhu Wujiu would not die on the spot, he would definitely die if the battle dragged on for 2 or 3 days. With Zhu Wujiu's wealth, he would not be able to afford a high-grade healing panacea. But this guy just did not die, and he did not even have a lingering illness. This had happened 4 times in a row, so Nangongji naturally became wary. He had a guilty conscience, and Zhu Wujiu was the only one who still had a relationship with Zhu Wan. As long as Zhu Wujiu did not die, he would not be able to rest easy. This could possibly cause the day when he broke through to Gushing Spring Tier to take forever to come. Thus he was determined to kill Zhu Wujiu on the spot today. Losing and killing were 2 completely different things, and the difficulty level was completely different. Thus, if he wanted to kill Zhu Wujiu, he would need to create an opportunity to kill him in a single strike. After that, he would be able to say that he could not stop himself. The two of them battled for a while longer, and Nangongji, relying on his stronger abilities, finally found a perfect opportunity. His sword pierced out and 3 flashes of cold light shot out, piercing straight towards Zhu Wujiu's heart. This was not sword chi, but rather his sword was too fast, so it created 2 afterimages. Earth-grade high-level martial arts technique, shadow dance sword technique. He had used up all his accumulated points to exchange for this martial arts technique, and it was all for the sake of today's battle, to kill Zhu Wujiu. Die, he said in his heart, and activated the strongest move of the shadow dance sword technique, launching a merciless attack. Zhu Wujiu also attacked and actually shot out 2 flashes of cold light. Could it be that he was also using a fast sword? No. Sword chi. The surrounding people all exclaimed in shock. This was sword chi, the sign of a ruler. Pu-piu. 2 flashes of blood appeared at the same time. Nangongji's sword had pierced into Zhu Wujiu's lower abdomen, and the sword chi that Zhu Wujiu had shot out had also sliced across Nangongji's throat, leaving behind a bloody gash. Nangongji's eyes shone with a cold light, and he immediately drew his sword and stabbed out again. He was going to kill this opponent. Shua, another flash of cold light flashed. Ling Han moved, brandishing his sword to meet Zhu Wujiu's attack. Chapter 98. With a ding, Nangongji was pushed back by the sword. He glared angrily at Ling Han and said, "Who are you to meddle in other people's business? Do you know that meddling in a battle is a very serious offense?" Ling Han smiled calmly and said, "He has already lost the ability to battle, so this battle is already over. However, if you want to spar with me, I don't mind teaching you a lesson." Nangongji couldn't help but glare angrily. Zhu Wujiu had actually formed a flash of sword chi, and had the bearing of a king. In the future he might become a great threat to him, and he had originally planned to completely finish off this opponent today. He had never thought that Ling Han would actually interfere. "Brat, meddlesome people never have a good ending," he threatened. Now that he had no chance to kill Zhu Wujiu, his heart was filled with fury. Either go all out and fight or get lost. "Don't talk so much," Ling Han said disdainfully. Nangongji's face was filled with anger, but he still waved his hand and swaggered off. Previously, when he had exchanged blows with Ling Han, he knew that the latter's ability was not inferior to his, and he had always been careful, not fighting a battle unprepared. Thus, since he could not kill Zhu Wujiu, he might as well leave. However, with his character, he would definitely not let this matter rest. He would first investigate Ling Han's background, and then decide what to do next. Who is this guy actually fighting with Nangongji? He should be this year's new student. His aura is only at the 5th layer of Poly, and he actually managed to scare Nangongji away. How rare. However, the Nangong clan is not to be trifled with, and Nangong Xing is a true disciple of the academy. Forget it, forget it. Let's not get involved with him, lest we bring trouble to ourselves. Everyone discussed animatedly, and soon left the martial arts field. Zhu Wujiu slowly got up. The physique of the silver light race was really not for show. After suffering such a heavy injury, he had recovered a lot in just a short while. Of course, the healing effect was completely incomparable to that of the indestructible Heaven Scroll. Firstly, the level of the indestructible Heaven Scroll was too high, and secondly, Zhu Wujiu's ability was too weak, and he was completely unable to unleash the true might of his physique. "Why are you helping me?" Zhu Wujiu asked. "Aren't you afraid of offending the Nangong family? When I see injustice on the road, I draw my sword to help. Can't I?" Ling Han smiled. "I don't believe that there are still people as naive as you." Zhu Wujiu shook his head. "However, I was born poor. You won't be able to get any benefits from me. I advise you not to waste your energy." "In that case," Ling Han thought for a moment, "you can be my subordinate. I'll definitely repay you for your help today." Zhu Wujiu turned to leave, obviously unwilling to agree to be Ling Han's subordinate. Those who could enter Huyang University could be called geniuses. How could they be willing to be inferior to others? Ling Han didn't chase after him. He just said leisurely, "You don't want revenge anymore?" Zhu Wujiu immediately stopped and slowed down. "I can teach you," Ling Han continued, "in half a year. I'll definitely help you surpass Nangong Ji, and let you take revenge with your own hands." Zhu Wujiu suddenly turned around and said, "Really? You already said that you were born poor. What benefits would I get from lying to you?" Ling Han smiled. Zhu Wujiu hesitated for a moment, then said, "All right, I agree to be your follower. If you can't help me surpass Nangong Ji in half a year, then I'll repay you for your help. If possible, I'll sell my life to you in the future." This guy really valued relationships. Just being Ling Han's follower wasn't a bad thing for him. On the contrary, it was a great opportunity. If it weren't for the fact that Ling Han had a friendship with the Silver Moon King, he definitely wouldn't have gone through all this trouble. Ling Han nodded and said, "I'll teach you a technique. In the future, you'll change to this technique." He lowered his voice and taught Zhu Wujiu a technique called the Silver Moon Technique. That's right, this technique was tailor-made for the people of the Silver Moon Clan. In the past, the Silver Moon Clan was destroyed, and after Ling Han's cultivation reached a certain level, he searched everywhere for the survivors of the Silver Moon Clan. He didn't find them, but he obtained the clan guarding technique of the Silver Moon Clan, which was this Silver Moon Technique. His memory was superb, and he only flipped through it once before memorizing it completely. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to take it out now. The Silver Moon Technique paired with the people of the Silver Moon Clan could completely unleash the power of Zhu Wujiu's physique, increasing his battle prowess by at least 1 star. The level of the Silver Moon Technique was also Earth Grade high level, enough for Zhu Wujiu to quickly catch up to Nangong Ji in terms of cultivation level. Silver Moon Physique and Sword Chi with these two added together. If Zhu Wujiu still couldn't defeat Nangong Ji, then he was too useless. Zhu Wujiu didn't know that this was an Earth Grade high-level technique, nor did he know that it could completely unleash the power of his physique. After asking for Ling Han's name and where he lived, he left in a daze. After all, he was injured and needed to recuperate. Little. Hunyo tugged at Ling Han's sleeve in dissatisfaction. All right, let's go eat some meat," Ling Han said with a smile. "Ling Han! Brother Ling!" He heard shouts coming from afar. Ling Han looked over and saw that it was Qi Yongyi, Jin Wuji, Qi Yongyi, and Li Dongyu, his 4 old friends from Diyuan City. "Brother Ling, you're really late. Today, you must punish yourself by drinking 3 cups of wine," Bailey Tingyun said. "How can 3 cups be enough? At least 10 cups. Li Dongyu also joined in the fun. Meat. Hunyo jumped up and down. Ling Han laughed heartily and said, "Let's go, please. It's my treat today. We won't go home until we're drunk. We won't leave until we're drunk." Qi Yongyi and the others all laughed. 5 adults and 1 child left the academy and found a restaurant to drink. However, Qi Yongyi and the others soon discovered to their dismay that as long as a dish was served, as long as there was meat, it would be instantly annihilated by Hunyo. It was like a whirlwind sweeping away the clouds. Thus, they also joined in the fight for food. But when it came to eating, who could compete with Hunyo? The little girl did not use chopsticks, so after a single slap, who would be able to bear to eat? Is this little girl's stomach a bottomless pit? Qi Yongyi and the others were all curious, But even Qi Yongyi did not recognize her. This little girl was the one from the wrestling ring in Yuan City. After all, Hu Niu's hair was a mess at that time, and her entire body was dirty. Unlike now, though she was still very wild, she was as delicate as a porcelain doll. I really envy Brother Ling. You've become a true disciple the moment you enter the academy, and can obtain countless cultivation resources, Li Dongyu said ruefully. Qi Yongyi nodded and said, the gap between a true disciple and a normal disciple is really too big. Originally, the gap between me and Fengyan was not very big, but now I fourth prince, at least you still have the support of the royal house of Deyuan, which is much better than us, Jin Wuji immediately said. That's right, the royal house of Deyuan has more resources than the four of us combined. If you still cry about being poor, then how are we supposed to live? Bailey Tengyun also called out. Ling Han, I heard that you have some grudges with Feng Luo. Now that he has also entered the academy, you have to be careful of him inviting Feng Yan to deal with you, Qi Yongyi suddenly said. Chapter 99. Is there anyone else who is unconvinced? Ling Han stopped and asked the others with a slight smile. Everyone hurriedly shook their heads. This guy was too fierce. Unless one was in gushing spring tear, there was no one who had the right to exchange blows with him. The few gushing spring tear martial artists humphed. They were not afraid of Ling Han, but were rather wary of Lu Yutong. Now this girl had drawn her sword and was standing guard by Ling Han's side, so no one dared to act rashly. Most importantly, they were not in the mood to bicker with Ling Han. That stock of spiritual medicine had run into that mysterious area, and the most important thing now was to figure out how to get it out. More and more people surged over, completely surrounding the area. This could possibly be the central area of the whole underground space. It formed a circle, and the area it occupied was quite large. Most importantly, that pitch-black area swallowed all light, as if it was a solid object that could block one's line of sight. If one stood at one end, they would not be able to see the other end. Thankfully, there were enough people who had entered, and they could just barely surround this area. At least, if that stock of spiritual medicine ran out, they would be able to discover it immediately. What do we do now? After surrounding the area, everyone was in a dilemma. Trap it, I don't believe it won't come out, someone said. Are you stupid? That's a stalk of grass in the first place, and it can completely take root in there for a few years or even a few hundred years. But what about us? At most 3 days we have to leave. Someone scolded. That's true, that person said sheepishly. Everyone frowned. That was definitely a stock of spiritual medicine, and had even reached the level of the legendary spiritual medicine, yet they could only stare at it. This practically drove them crazy. Someone went out to contact the old monsters outside, hoping that they could have some sort of solution. The others stood guard here. Ling Han slowly approached that invisible wall. He stretched out his hand to sense it. What a familiar feeling. A sliver of a smile appeared at the corners of Ling Han's lips. All those years ago he had entered many historical sites, and had seen many similar situations. This was also the reason why he had been warned in advance. This was not some kind of wall but rather a kind of aura that was above the heaven tier. If he still had the cultivation level of the heaven tier, then with his research on this kind of aura, he could do his best to break through and let himself pass. But now he was completely unqualified to do so. Could it be that he had no choice but to use that? Ling Han took out that broken saber. This was his disciple's treasured saber, and could possibly be the only relic that could be found now. If he fully released the remaining might of the spirit tool, he should be able to barely activate the power of the heaven tier. But the problem was, if he released it like that, this treasured saber would be completely destroyed. Ling Han hesitated, and there was still another problem. This saber could only release it once, so how was he going to come out after he entered? But after only an instant, he made up his mind. He was going to enter, because there was not only a godly medicine inside, but also the secret of the great battle of the past. He wanted to know why. Moreover, if there really was the remains of a shattering void tier elite inside that formed this aura, then he might have a way to break through. You two cover for me, Ling Han said to Lu Yutong and Li Si-chan. Because this area was very big, everyone stood about 10 meters apart from each other surrounding this area. Thus, Ling Han stood in the middle of the two girls, and if the people on the two sides did not pay attention, it would be very difficult for them to notice him. The two girls did not know what he wanted to do, but they both nodded. They knew that this guy had abilities that normal people did not have. Ling Han began to awaken the treasured saber. Jiang Yufeng's martial intent was inherited from him, and although he was still very weak now, they were of the same lineage. Under the guidance of his divine sense, the martial intent within the treasured saber also began to awaken. The seals on the treasured saber lit up one by one, and were extremely bright. But this was the final flash, and very soon it would completely return to normal. Ling Han did not have the slightest bit of hesitation, and used the treasured saber to break through the aura, opening a path for himself. Even so, his nerves were still extremely tense, and the treasured saber in his hand trembled like a swimming fish. His figure also swayed, and he walked out a zigzag path. His figure disappeared into the dark area in an instant, never to be seen again. Lu Yutong and Li Xichen were both at a loss for words. They exchanged a look, and could see the deep shock in each other's eyes, as well as a deep sense of respect. This young man, what else could he not do? They very quickly withdrew their gazes and gathered their spirits, covering for Ling Han to prevent others from discovering his disappearance. Otherwise, if Ling Han really obtained some kind of treasure with his current abilities, he would definitely not be able to keep it. Ling Han's whole body was covered with sweat. This chi field was filled with danger at every step. All those years ago, when he was still a powerful warrior of heaven tier, he would only need to take one wrong step to be severely injured. And with his current cultivation level of the 6th layer of element gathering tier, this was practically like trying to pull a chestnut out of the fire. The slightest mistake would mean that he would be smashed into smithereens, and he would definitely not have a second chance. But this caused him to become even more excited. His expression became extremely focused, and his eyes became incomparably bright. There was usually no difference between a genius and a madman. In his last life he had focused on alchemy, and the moment he began to concoct pills he would be like a madman. But in this life he had placed his focus on martial arts, and similarly had a crazy side to him. It was just that he had not had the chance to show it before. This kind of heavy danger naturally caused his whole body to shiver, but it also made him even more excited. Hovering between life and death made him feel the meaning of life, and his divine sense surged like the waves of the sea. He even had a feeling that perhaps he could train his divine sense in this kind of dangerous place. The treasured saber's light began to flicker, and Ling Han was shocked. The state of this saber's damage had exceeded his imagination. It had actually only lasted for this long, and it was about to collapse. Although he liked to take risks, taking risks and throwing away one's life were two different things. He hurriedly increased his speed. Because he had to calculate the changes in the aura field, his spirit was also highly focused, and it was also highly exhausting. His whole body's sweat flowed down like water, instantly drenching his clothes, and even leaving a water stain under his feet. Yet he did not feel it at all. His eyes were bright, and he continued to advance. The treasured saber flickered one last time, and all the symbols disappeared at the same time, shattering one after another. This represented that the martial intent within the saber had been completely annihilated. Ling Han took a step and charged out. He had finally walked out of the area that had been sealed off by the aura field. Light once again appeared in front of him. This was an area that had a circumference of only 30 meters. In the center, there was a skeleton sitting cross-legged on the ground, and that stalk of godly medicine was doing its best to dig its roots into the soil. However, the ground here seemed to be especially sturdy. After so much time had passed, this stalk of godly medicine had actually only dug its roots halfway into the ground. Ling Han's eyes lit up, and he quietly walked towards this stalk of godly medicine. He did not know if there was a positive side to godly medicine, but it was obvious that this stalk of godly medicine had not discovered him yet. 10 steps, 8 steps, 5 steps, 3 steps. Ling Han suddenly leaped out, and stretched out a hand to grab that stalk of godly medicine. Chapter 100. Qi Yongyi and the others all looked furious. Kneeling down to lick someone's shoes, what kind of humiliation was that? If this Wei He Lu was in Gushing Spring Tier or a black grade alchemist, Then perhaps he would have had the right to do so, but he was only a low-level yellow-grade alchemist, a small martial artist in the first layer of poly. How could he be so arrogant? Those born in the imperial city really had a sense of superiority. You've gone too far. Jin Wuji immediately shouted, Wei Lu, you're only a low-level yellow-grade alchemist now. Don't you think you're too arrogant? You dare to oppose me? Wei Lu laughed coldly, appearing extremely confident. Presently, he was indeed only a yellow-grade low-level alchemist, but his future was limitless. Otherwise, why would Feng Luo deliberately befriend him? Of course, the reason why he and Feng Luo called each other brother was also because of Feng Yan. Otherwise, how could a mere martial artist of element gathering tier enter his sight? He had astonishing potential in alchemy, and Feng Yan had the potential to become a king in martial art. After all, this world was a world where the strong were respected. No matter how awesome an alchemist was, they still needed the help of a strong martial art cultivator. Jin Wuji instantly had the urge to beat someone up. Wei Lu was only in the first layer of poly, and his appearance was also improved by alchemical pills. He could suppress him with one hand, and a low-level yellow-grade alchemist was even less worth mentioning. He would never ask for one. The problem was, he might be taken as a disciple by Wu Songlin, who was a high-level black-grade alchemist. Back then, Ling Han only had 2 low-level black-grade alchemists behind him, yet everyone in Diyuan City was willing to do him a favor. What more Wu Songlin? Jin Wuji's expression darkened, but he did not speak again. What are you being so arrogant for? Bailey Tengyun was young and impetuous. Remembering that he was a citizen of Diyuan City, even if Wei Lu really became a black-grade alchemist in the future, it had nothing to do with him, so he naturally would not show any respect. Wei Lu could not help but look displeased and said, Are you provoking me? So what if I am? Do you dare to fight me? Bailey Tengyun said proudly. Young Master Wei. At this moment another 3 people walked over. The aura they exuded was extremely powerful, reaching the 9th layer of poly. So it's you guys. Wei Lu walked over, a faint smile appearing on his face. Young Master Wei, we've run into trouble, someone said with a smile. He was dressed in azure battle clothes and had a tall and slender figure. Wei Lu revealed a disdainful smile. He pointed at Bailey Tengyun and said, This guy wants to challenge me. Ha ha, where did this foolish boy come from? He actually dares to challenge young Master Wei. The green-robed man laughed. He crooked his finger at Bailey Tengyun and said, Come, I'll be your opponent. How could Bailey Tengyun endure such provocation? Just as he was about to agree, he was pulled back by Qi Yongyi. He heard Qi Yongyi say, When Haixing, when did you become so useless? An expert ranked in the top 100 actually wants to bully a junior who has just entered the academy. So it's the Eternal Night King. The green-robed man seemed to have just noticed Qi Yongyi. He raised his head and cupped his hands, saying, No wonder you dare to oppose young Master Wei. The 4th prince of Diyuan City is indeed domineering. On the surface he was praising Qi Yongyi, but in reality he was attracting hatred. Wei Li's expression immediately darkened, and he said, So he's a relative of the emperor. No wonder he's so arrogant. He had displayed outstanding talent in alchemy since he was young, and there was no one his age who didn't fawn over him, wanting to have a good relationship with this future alchemy grandmaster. When Haixing's words naturally caused him to feel a strong dissatisfaction towards Qi Yongyi. Ling Han, are you going to kneel or not? Feng Luo interrupted. The person he hated the most was naturally Ling Han, and Qi Yongyi was the 4th prince of Diyuan City, and it was extremely likely that he would inherit the throne in the future. Feng Luo naturally did not want to offend him. So it's senior brother Feng Yan's younger brother. After when Haixing and the others found out about Feng Luo's identity, they immediately revealed smiles. Although they did not respect Feng Luo, Feng Yan was too strong. It was said that he had the strength to become a core disciple. One person immediately said to Ling Han, Brat, I Shun Yuxuan will say something today. If you can't satisfy junior brother Feng Luo today, then you can only return to the academy horizontally. I Mi Zhongguang am the same, the 3rd person said. Feng Luo was incomparably proud of himself, and laughed loudly as he said, Ling Han, you're still being unreasonable? Who do you think you are, to actually dare to put on airs in front of me, and humiliate me time and time again? Who do you think I am? Even a single finger of mine is worth 10,000 times more than you. Wei Lu and the other three all revealed cold smiles. A mere new student from another city would naturally not be taken seriously by them. The only people they would be wary of were the direct descendants of the 8 great clans of the imperial capital. At the entrance, the 4 guards of the Spirit Treasures Pavilion only watched coldly from the sidelines. As long as they did not cause trouble within the Spirit Treasures Pavilion, even if the sky collapsed, they would not care. Hurry up and kneel. Feng Luo roared loudly. Kneel, your sister. Ling Han attacked, charging towards Feng Luo. How dare you? When Haixing Mi Zhongguang and Shen Yuxuan all attacked at the same time. They were all at the 9th layer of Pali, and their battle prowess was extremely strong. None of them were weaker than Qi Yongyi. The 3 of them attacked together, and their momentum was astonishing. Get lost. Ling Han used the exiting cloud steps, and actually dashed out from the encirclement of the 3. When Haixing and the other 2 were all shocked. When they saw that Ling Han was only at the 5th layer of Pali, they did not take him seriously at all. Who would have thought that his speed would be so fast, and his footsteps would be so strange? Thus, they did not even use their full strength, and Ling Han easily broke through their encirclement. Ling Han had already appeared in front of Feng Luo, and stretched out his hand to grab him. You dare! Wei Lu moved to block in front of Feng Luo. He was confident that he was a yellow-grade low-level alchemist, and also the disciple of the future headmaster of the alchemy department, so he did not think that Ling Han would dare to touch a single hair on his head. Pa! However, before he could finish his thought, he was sent flying by a slap from Ling Han. Fuck, this guy really dared to hit me. With a paw, Ling Han slapped Feng Luo onto the ground again, and before he could get up, Ling Han had already stepped on Feng Luo's face. Bastard, you actually dare to step on me. You must be tired of living. My brother will definitely kill you. He will. Feng Luo screamed as he threatened Ling Han. Only a profligate young master like him would dare to make such a threat in front of so many people. What kind of place was the imperial city? Murder was a serious crime. On the other side, Wei Li's face was also filled with rage. He had actually been sent flying with a single slap. Too insolent, too despicable. He would definitely not forgive this audacious guy. Junior brother Wei. Right at this moment, a young man and woman happened to walk over. When the woman saw Wei Li's appearance, she could not help but reveal a shocked expression. Senior Sister Li. Wei Lu hurriedly crawled up, his hands hanging by his legs, appearing extremely respectful. This woman was Li Si-chan. In front of others, Wei Lu could put on a high and mighty attitude, but in front of Li Si-chan, he had to obediently put away his arrogance, because the latter's talent in alchemy far surpassed his own. Wu Songlin only admired his talent, but Li Si-chan was Wu Songlin's most beloved disciple. Even if he really became Wu Songlin's disciple, he would still have to be respectful in front of Li Si-chan. Chapter 101. The man with Li Si-chan revealed a hint of anger, and said, "Who is so daring to be so rude to an alchemist? It's He Jun-shan." Qi Yongyi immediately frowned. True disciple, 2nd layer of gushing spring tier. He did not speak softly, intentionally reminding Ling Han. Wei Lu smiled. With an elite in the 2nd layer of gushing spring tier here, no matter how powerful Ling Han was, what could he do? He said, "Brother He, this brat is too arrogant. He bullied senior brother Feng Yan's younger brother, Feng Luo. I just didn't go over and said a few words of justice, and he slapped me to the ground. Oh, I'd like to see who's so awesome," He Jun-chan said coldly. Ling Han. Li Si-chan finally noticed Ling Han. She involuntarily took a few steps forward and said, "Where do you live now? I've been looking for you everywhere." Hiss. What was the relationship between the two? Hearing Li Si-chan's words, everyone became curious. Could it be? He Jun-chan's expression immediately darkened. He was Li Si-chan's pursuer, and now the girl of his dreams actually said such ambiguous words, making him feel as uncomfortable as if he had swallowed a fly. No, it's my master who's looking for you." Li Si-chan also realized her mistake, and hurriedly corrected herself. "Oh, why is your master looking for me?" Ling Han asked very casually. "Master wants to invite you to tea." Who? Everyone spluttered. Who was Li Xichan's master? Who was Wu Songlin, a black-grade high-level alchemist, the headmaster of the alchemy department, a super important person who could make Rain Country tremble with a stomp of his foot? This important person actually wanted to invite Ling Han to tea? How many people could drink tea with Wu Songlin? The clan heads of the 8 great clans, the pavilion masters of Tianyi, the headmaster of the martial arts department, perhaps only a few, but Ling Han, a minor character who had just entered Huyang University, could he be on the same level as these important people of Rain Country? I don't have time, Ling Han said calmly. Who? Instantly, everyone choked again and revealed expressions of disbelief. If Wu Songlin invited him to tea, perhaps even the clan heads of the 8 great clans wouldn't dare to say that they weren't free. This kid was too awesome and he even rejected him so cleanly. On the other hand, Qi Yongyi, Bailey Tingyuan, and the others revealed joyful expressions. Their hearts were thumping madly as they knew that their previous bet was correct. However, they had never imagined that Ling Han, who had only just entered Huyang University, would be able to form a friendship with the headmaster of the alchemy department and a black-grade high-level alchemist. Moreover, it was an extremely deep friendship. If they knew that the other black-grade alchemist of Rain Country, the pavilion master of Tianyi, also had to address Ling Han as young Master Han, what kind of expressions would these people have? Let go of me. Fuck your mother, how dare you step on me? This young master will definitely not forgive you. Feng Luo was still yelling. His face was being stepped on by Ling Han, and he could not hear what the others were saying at all. However, even if he could hear them with his limited knowledge, he could not possibly know what the 3 words, Wu Songlin, represented. Everyone's attitude changed at the same time. Ling Han was someone who even Wu Songlin had to treat to tea with, so who would dare to make things difficult for him? Feng Yan indeed had a very promising future. But there was no need to even mention Wei Helu, a black-grade high-level alchemist. Right now, he was not even Wu Songlin's disciple. My apologies, we have offended you earlier. Please forgive us, junior brother Ling. We will definitely pay you a visit another day to apologize. When Hai Xing and the others immediately clasped their hands in greeting towards Ling Han. In their hearts they hated Wei Helu and Feng Luo so much that they gritted their teeth. If it were not for the 2 of them, would the 3 of them have offended Ling Han? Ling Han only waved his hand, not taking the 3 of them to heart at all. When Hai Xing and the others were initially angered, but when they remembered that the other party was someone who even Wu Songlin had to treat to tea with, their anger instantly dissipated. If it was Wu Songlin who had treated them like this, would they dare to be angry? Wasn't this the end of it? Meanwhile, Qi Yongyi and the others could finally vent their anger. Previously they had been so arrogant, but now they were as cowardly as dogs. They all crossed their arms over their chests and raised their heads high, a look of disdain on their faces. When Hai Xing and the others did not dare to say anything more, they hurriedly turned around and left, not even intending to participate in the auction. How could they be in such a mood? They were all thinking about how to apologize to Ling Han in the future. Wei Helu's expression changed again and again like a chameleon. In the end he gritted his teeth, walked towards Ling Han and said, "Young Master Han, I have eyes but fail to see. Please be magnanimous and forgive me this once." "Who are you?" Ling Han asked calmly. Wei Helu instantly wanted to bite someone, thinking, "You did not suffer any loss. I was the one who suffered a slap from you, and now I've taken the initiative to apologize, so why are you still not willing to let the matter rest? Junior brother, could it be that you have some misunderstanding with Ling Han?" Li Xichan saw this, and her pretty face immediately darkened. She was very clear about the position Ling Han held in Master's heart. Master really respected him as a grandmaster alchemist. You actually dared to get into a conflict with Ling Han? That was really seeking your own death. It's nothing much. It's just that Brother Ling and young Master Luo have some misunderstanding. I wanted to mediate on their behalf, but I did not think that both parties' tempers would be a bit rushed, so a little misunderstanding occurred, Wei Helu said lightly. He looked at Ling Han darkly, and his heart was filled with extreme hatred. However, he had also recovered from his initial shock. He did not believe that Wu Songlin would seek out Ling Han for tea. Who was he trying to fool? Who was Wu Songlin and who was Ling Han? There was almost no possibility that the 2 of them knew each other, much less had a cup of tea together. It must be that Li Sichan herself wanted to seek out Ling Han, but was afraid that others would find out, so she pushed the blame onto Wu Songlin. Because who would dare to seek out Wu Songlin for proof of such a thing? He was indeed very respectful of Li Sichan, but now that he felt that he had something on her, he was naturally full of courage. Brother Wei, aren't you making it sound too easy? Jin Wuji laughed coldly. Just now, you wanted Ling Han to kneel down and lick Feng Luo's shoes. What? Li Sichan's beautiful face instantly turned as cold as water. She walked towards Wei Helu, as if she was looking at a dead man. She would definitely report this matter to Wu Songlin, and with Wu Songlin's respect for Ling Han, Wei Helu would not even be able to stay in the Alchemy Academy, much less be Wu Songlin's disciple. Senior Sister Li, don't listen to their one-sided story. Wei Helu had already steeled his heart to continue down this path, so he naturally would not relent. Ling Han, you're still not going to let go. Feng Luo was both angry and embarrassed, and he shouted gloomily, you guys really don't feel any pain when you're standing here. He's lying on the ground, and there's even a foot stepping on his face. Ling Han snorted, and exerted some force with his foot. Feng Luo instantly let out a tragic cry, and his face was already severely deformed. He looked at the crowd and said with a smile, don't worry, I won't kill him here. Everyone's hair stood on end when they heard this. Ling Han meant that he was still going to kill Feng Luo in the future. It was more refreshing to read on one's phone. Chapter 102. Hunyo stared at Feng Luo. This human had shown strong enmity towards Ling Han just now, causing her to want to kill him. She stared at Feng Luo's neck, thinking of taking a bite out of it and finishing this human off. Ling Han picked Hunyo up and said, he's too dirty. Hunyo reluctantly curled up in Ling Han's arms, her eyes still showing strong killing intent. Pa! Ling Han stomped down, and Feng Luo suddenly let out an earth-shattering scream. His mouth was full of blood, and when he opened his mouth, he spat out over a dozen broken teeth. It turned out that all his teeth had been crushed by this stomp. Feng Luo was in so much pain that tears and snot flowed out. The pain was truly excruciating, but because Ling Han had let go of his foot, he was finally able to climb up. His gaze swept over the crowd, and he felt that everyone here looked repulsive. Wasn't it so? They all watched as Ling Han crushed all his teeth, and they actually didn't help. Damn it, damn it. But he also knew that he was powerless to make an enemy out of these people. He only glared hatefully at the crowd, then abruptly turned and left. Of course, the one he hated the most was definitely Ling Han. He would definitely not let this matter rest. Wei Helu could not stay any longer, and hurriedly left with Feng Luo. Qi Yongyi and the others all frowned. Ling Han's actions were equivalent to forming a death grudge with the Feng brothers, which was not easy to deal with. But Ling Han had previously trampled on Feng Luo, so this grudge had already been formed, and they were already enemies. They believed that as long as Ling Han stayed in the imperial city, Feng Yin would not dare to make a move no matter how domineering he was. Ling Han was unafraid. He was a powerful warrior of Heaven Tier in his last life, and although he had to start from scratch now, he still needed to be wary of these two small fries. He would crush them to death sooner or later. Haha, the auction is about to start. Let's go in, Qi Yongyi said with a smile. This time he had borrowed Ling Han's fame to suppress Wen Haixing and the others, making him very happy. Let's go together, Li Sichan suggested. He Junshen, Qi Yongyi, and the others all revealed expressions of disbelief. Was this really Li Sichan? One of the two beauties of the imperial city was Lu Yutong, and the other was Li Sichan. Unlike Lu Yutong, she had always presented herself as an iceberg beauty. She also kept people at arm's length, and no one could even dream of getting close to her. Li Sichan was very gentle, but hidden under that gentleness was also coldness. She was polite to everyone and would not let anyone get close to her. Now she'd actually taken the initiative to invite Ling Han, and this was naturally inconceivable to Qi Yongyi and the others to the extreme. All of them wondered if they'd heard wrongly, or if their eyes were playing tricks on them, or if they'd recognized the wrong person. However, He Junshen's expression immediately became gloomy. He had never been used to Ling Han, And now that the woman he admired seemed to be related to Ling Han, he felt a strong sense of jealousy. Sure, Ling Han agreed casually. The group entered the Spirit Treasures Pavilion. In a place like the Imperial City, Qi Yongye's reputation was obviously not as powerful as Li Xichan's, because Li Xichan actually had a private room and brought everyone inside. This room could accommodate 10 people, so it wasn't too crowded. He Junshun began to ask about Ling Han's identity in a roundabout way. Which force did such an awesome person come from? However, when he found out that Ling Han actually came from Gray Cloud Town of Diyuan City, he was instantly stunned. How was that possible? He could not understand why such an important figure like Wu Songlin would invite Ling Han to tea. No matter how he thought about it, he could not understand it. Conversely, Qi Yongyi and the others were more confident, because when they were in Diyuan City, there were already 3 black grade alchemists by Ling Han's side. Although Wu Songlin's status was far from what Zhu He Xian and the others could compare to, it was still a little easier to accept. Ling Han did not care what others thought. He only wanted to know what good things would appear in the auction. After 10,000 years, there seemed to be many pill recipes that had been lost. Something as good as the dark moon grass had actually fallen to the level of being used to concoct purple origin pills. Then, it was extremely likely that an extremely valuable but cheap spirit medicine would appear in the auction. Not long after, the auction began. Because today was only a monthly small-scale auction, although there were many people who came, there were not many who could bring out large amounts of money. The prices of the majority of the auction items were within a reasonable range. However, Ling Han was extremely shocked because some alchemical pills that were incomparably low level in his eyes could actually be sold for a very high price. People who were stupid had a lot of money. He secretly decided that it was time to concoct some alchemical pills. Although he still had over 100,000 silver notes in his pocket, the people here had the extravagance of throwing away large amounts of money, so 100,000 silver really could not buy many things. Who knows how many alchemists are here today? Next up is a true precious medicine. The auctioneer put all his effort into his performance on the stage. He waved his hand, and a beautiful female attendant carried a tray onto the stage. There were 3 medicinal herbs on it, and if one looked closely, they would actually be able to see rays of starlight shining on them. Second star grass, someone immediately called out. It's actually second star grass. To alchemists, it is indeed very precious, but to martial artists, it is too useless. The auctioneer cleared his throat and said, "That's right, this is indeed the second star grass, and it can be used to concoct the spirit refreshing pill. Everyone knows the use of the spirit refreshing pill. It can replenish the mind. To martial artists, this is indeed not very valuable, but to alchemists, its value is immeasurable. To martial artists, if their mind was completely exhausted, they would no longer be able to use their origin power to cultivate. Thus, the significance of the spirit refreshing pill to martial artists was to allow them to cultivate for a little more time each day. But who would have so many spirit refreshing pills to squander like this? Even if they had 10 of them, it would only be equivalent to cultivating for 10 more days, so what use were they? But to alchemists it was completely different. Controlling fire was extremely taxing on one's mind, but refining some alchemical pills also required a very, very long time. What if one's mind was exhausted midway, and their soul power was insufficient? The spirit refreshing pill could then be used to replenish one's soul power, recover one's mind, and successfully refine alchemical pills that were originally impossible to refine. Thus Li Xichan's eyes instantly lit up. Which alchemists would dare to say that their own mind was strong enough to refine all kinds of alchemical pills? Ling Han's eyes also lit up, and he even had the urge to curse. That was the second star grass, and it could be used to concoct the second star pill. The effect of the second star pill was to strengthen the mind. One was replenishment and the other was to strengthen. Could they be the same? If it was replenishment, it would be gone after eating it once, but if it was strengthening, then the effect would exist forever. Moreover, even martial artists would flock to it like ducks, so its value could not be mentioned in the same breath. Ling Han shook his head in his heart. The Tao of alchemy now was really too declining. Previously, there was the dark moon grass that was used to concoct the purple origin pill, and now the second star grass was wasted on the spirit refreshing pill. He said to Li Xichan, "Girl, let me have this second star grass." Li Xichan knew that Ling Han was also an alchemist, so it was not strange that he would have the second star grass, but she needed it as well. She could not help but reveal a troubled expression. If she were to reject him, this was a person that even her master had to respect. But if she were to agree, then wouldn't she lose such a precious medicine? Ling Han saw this and moved his head closer, saying in a low voice, "I'll sell you a cultivation technique that can speed up the recovery of your soul power." What? Li Sichan instantly lost her composure and cried out. Chapter 103. A glutton actually forgot to eat. The sun must have risen from the west today. Ling Han thought that there was definitely something wrong with the little girl. Something must have happened to her. Yesterday she had eaten a godly medicine. With her cultivation level of body refining tier, eating such a tonic would definitely be too much. Ling Han ran to the little girl's room. Originally, she had slept by Ling Han's feet, but Lu Yutong thought that no matter how small a girl was, she was still a girl, so she prepared a room for her. He entered the room, swept his eyes over the room and was instantly shocked, because there was no sign of the little girl. Instead, there was actually an egg on the bed. That's right, it was an egg. Moreover, it was extraordinarily large, as thick as a man's arms, and as tall as half a man's height. The body of the egg was snow white, but there were multiple golden-colored patterns that covered the entire body of the egg. Ling Han was dumbfounded. Even if the little girl had undergone a great transformation and turned into a beautiful fairy in the prime of her youth, he would still be able to accept it after being shocked for a moment. But a living person had actually turned into an egg? What did that mean? He did not doubt in the slightest that Hunyo was currently inside the egg, because the array he had set up had not been touched in the slightest. Obviously, no one had entered or left. Hunyo's origins were very strange in the first place. She could increase her cultivation level by eating large amounts of food, which was an extremely shocking fact. Thus, although the power of the godly medicine was endless, it was not impossible for the little girl to refine it. This was also the reason why Ling Han had not been too worried yesterday. But an old hen turning into a duck, and a little girl turning into an egg, this was very strange. Ling Han walked in front of the egg and first observed it, but could not find a single clue. He stretched out a hand and pressed it on the eggshell, and shockingly discovered that the eggshell was actually burning hot, as if it was about to burn. This was really possible. He moved the egg up and placed it on the ground to prevent the bedding from burning and burning the whole courtyard to ashes. What exactly was this little girl's origin? Ling Han became more and more curious. In his last life, he had stood at the pinnacle of martial arts, and had also entered a considerable number of historical sites, so it could be said that he had a very good understanding of special constitutions. However, he had never heard of any race that could increase their cultivation level by eating, and furthermore that could produce an egg. He did not dare to open the eggshell either. What exactly was Hunyo's situation? Although he had never seen it before, he only had to refer to birds to know. Eggs had to be broken by themselves, and if he cracked open the eggshell, that would definitely be pulling up seedlings to help them grow, and would only harm others. How long had it been since he had reincarnated into this life? And he had actually encountered so many strange and bizarre things. Thankfully, his heart was big enough or he would really be scared to death. Forget it, it seems to be quite peaceful now, so the little girl should be fine. I'll just let her continue to incubate. When he said the word incubate, he could not help but reveal a strange expression. Every morning when he woke up, discussing sword arts with Mo Gao had already become his daily routine. A few days ago, he had no way to do so outside, but now that he had returned, he naturally went to Mo Gao's courtyard. The two of them discussed the art of the sword, and verified each other's theories. Both of them had improved greatly. In less than 3 days I should be able to break through. Tomorrow I will have to go into seclusion, Mo Gao suddenly said. Ling Han was startled, then clasped his hands in obeisance, and said, "Then congratulations, teacher." This sword maniac was a genius in the first place, but his goal was too high, and he had set his sights on sword heart, which had caused him to be unable to advance at all for over 10 years. It was just like how others only needed to obtain 10 points to level up, but he needed to obtain 1,000 points to directly level up to 100. Naturally, he had been stuck at the same level all this time. But after verifying each other's theories with Ling Han, the door to the art of the sword, which had originally only been slightly opened, was completely open to him, and he suddenly obtained a huge leap in improvement. As the saying went, thick accumulation leads to thin release, which allowed him to instantly obtain the comprehension needed for a breakthrough. Ling Han did not find it strange in the slightest. Compared to the difficulty of forming sword heart, gushing spring tear was really nothing. This sword maniac was already on the right track. At least before the spiritual infant tear, he would not encounter any bottlenecks in his cultivation. He could completely use that sliver of sword heart to cut through them, and his achievements would be limitless. Ling Han was also happy for him, and secretly decided that when this teacher of his reached the spiritual pedestal tier, he would choose a cultivation technique to gift to him. Because basically all the cultivation techniques in Rain Country only had 5 layers, there was no way to pry into the profound mysteries of the Flower Blossom tier. Otherwise, the 8 great clans would have at least produced 1 or 2 geniuses who had broken through to the Flower Blossom tier in all these years, right? He just didn't know what kind of fateful encounter the Qi clan had that allowed an ultimate warrior of the Flower Blossom tier to appear and stand guard over their territory. It couldn't be the power of the nation, right? Ling Han had never been an emperor before, so he was not very familiar with this. But when he thought about how only the imperial family of the 9 nations of the desolate north had an ultimate warrior of the Flower Blossom tier standing guard, then it should have something to do with the position of the emperor. Before this, Ling Han only knew that drawing upon the power of the nation could increase one's battle prowess. For example, Qi Yongyi was the son of a king, and could only draw upon the power of a city, but the power of the Son of Heaven Fist technique was still extremely powerful. If the ruler of a nation used the Son of Heaven Fist technique and drew upon the power of the nation, then the power would definitely be even stronger. But could the power of the nation also increase one's cultivation level, break through to the Flower Blossom tier, and complete the step of leaping out of the mortal body? Ling Han shook his head. Who cared? It wasn't like he had to worry about cultivation techniques anyway. When he left Mo Gao's place, it was already noon. Ling Han was too lazy to cook alone, so he left the academy and went to a restaurant to have a meal. He had only been in the imperial city for a few days, so every time he went to a different restaurant, he would try out which one had the best food. However, he was obviously someone who had a troublesome aura activated. He had just finished ordering his food and was waiting when he saw a group of 4 people come upstairs. It was mealtime at this time, and the business of this restaurant was quite good. At this time there were no empty seats left, so the 4 people stood at the foot of the stairs, scanning the place with their eyes, as if they were trying to find an empty table. A waiter had already gone up to greet them, and was explaining something to the 4 people. But after a short while, he ran over to Ling Han's side and said, "Sir, could you give up your seat?" Ling Han frowned and said, "Why should I give up my seat? Sir, could it be that you don't recognize the 4 of them? They are young Master Kong and his friends, and are not to be trifled with. I am only doing this for your sake." The waiter looked at Ling Han with a surprised expression, as if he was surprised that Ling Han did not recognize this young Master Kong. "I don't know him, and I have no intention of knowing him." Ling Han shook his head. "Hurry up and serve the dishes. Who knows, I might leave after eating for about an hour, and there would naturally be a seat." "About an hour?" The waiter smiled bitterly. If he had to wait for about an hour, young Master Kong would probably tear down their restaurant. But first come, first served. This was the most basic rule. If the restaurant could not even guarantee this, who would come to eat in the future? He could only brace himself and go see that young Master Kong. After another while, he saw young Master Kong and his friends walk over together. "Pauper, take this 100 silver coins and get lost," young Master Kong said, his face full of disdain. Chapter 104. Li Sichuan left happily, while Ling Han lay down on the bed to rest. It wasn't that he didn't want to concoct the 2nd star pill immediately, but he really didn't think that he would be able to obtain such a spirit medicine on his first day in the imperial city. Where would he get the supplementary medicinal ingredients from? Thus, he naturally had to go to Tianjiji tomorrow to buy all the medicinal ingredients before he could proceed to the next step. At the same time, he also had to decorate his own courtyard. After all, he was going to live here for a few years, so it was necessary to set up some restrictions in the surroundings as one of his trump cards. Meanwhile, Hunyo lay at his feet like a big cat, and soon emitted long and thin breathing sounds. However, if there was even the slightest sign of movement, she would immediately be startled awake, baring her sharp teeth and growling in a low voice. He believed that with Lu Yutong's influence in the academy, it would be very easy for her to find him. Ling Han didn't think about anything else and peacefully fell asleep. The night passed uneventfully, and early the next morning, Ling Han cooked breakfast. After feeding himself and Hunyo, he first went to pay his respects to his teacher. This was the basic quality of a student. He pushed open the door and entered, only to see that Mo Gao was currently practicing the sword, but very strangely, he only held the sword in his right hand, while his left hand formed a sword seal. He didn't move for a long time. Was he practicing the sword or cultivating qi? Hunyo, however, revealed a very guarded expression. She supported herself with both hands on the ground, her whole body slightly arched, and her small mouth opened. There was a fierce glint in her eyes, and she was ready to attack at any moment. Ling Han was surprised. The little girl would only show such an expression when she felt threatened, but the question was Mo Gao's simple action really that threatening? Wait, Ling Han's pupils dilated slightly. His divine sense caught a hint of something inconceivable. It was the aura emitted from Mo Gao's body. It was extremely mysterious and vaguely familiar, yet he couldn't quite put his finger on it. A pair of swords, and it was related to swords. You've come, Mo Gao said. Then come practice the sword with me. What sword technique is this? Ling Han asked. It's not a sword technique, but an invincible sword technique. Mo Gao's explanation was very mysterious. Ling Han, on the other hand, felt that Mo Gao's aura was very mysterious. Now that he heard Mo Gao's words were even more mysterious, he seemed to have grasped something, but it wasn't very clear. Is there an invincible sword in the world? He asked. In the hands of an unrivaled swordsman, it is an unrivaled sword, said Mo Gao. I am the sword, my sword heart is bright, piercing through all attacks, breaking all attacks. Boom! Ling Han's mind was shaken, and raging waves were set off. Kenshin, no wonder he felt a mysterious and familiar feeling. It turned out that Mo Gao was actually cultivating his sword heart. He did not doubt in the slightest that Mo Gao was deliberately mystifying things. That was because the level of martial art in Rain Country was too low. Just by forming sword qi, one could be called a ruler. There was absolutely no one who had formed sword ray, so how could one even talk about sword heart? The enlightened sword heart was the highest realm of the sword Tao. Under the enlightened sword heart, all attacks in the world could be understood like the palm of one's hand, and a swing of the sword would naturally destroy all techniques. Who would have thought that a swordsman in the 9th layer of Pali could actually faintly touch upon sword heart? No wonder Mo Gao was obviously a genius when he was young. Otherwise, he would not have been accepted into Huyang University, but had suddenly gone mad. Actually, it was not that he had gone mad, but rather that he had already begun cultivating sword heart at that time. But how difficult was it to grasp sword heart? Thus, his cultivation had stagnated for these 10 years, and he had focused all his energy on comprehending sword heart. Ling Han was filled with deep veneration. Sword heart. Even in his last life, there were not many swordsmen who had managed to cultivate it. But as long as one managed to cultivate it, not to mention being invincible among those of the same cultivation level, one could even defeat powerful enemies who were of a higher cultivation level. It was extremely terrifying. He clasped his hands in obeisance and said, "Please guide me, teacher." Mo Gao was a little surprised. Aside from himself, there was no one in the academy who did not think that he was crazy. In fact, in these 10 years, he had occasionally doubted whether the path he had taken was the right one, and whether he could create an invincible sword. This young man actually did not hesitate to ask him to practice with the sword. What kind of trust did he have in him? Thinking of this, Mo Gao actually felt a little moved. He, alone with his sword, had completely isolated himself. For more than 10 years, he had been practicing the sword, practicing the sword, practicing the sword, and practicing the sword. Now there was actually a young man who admired and believed in him so much, which made him instantly excited. This was a good student and he would definitely teach him well. Mo Gao thought in his heart, and immediately began to talk incessantly. The way of the sword is like a gentleman, magnanimous, and one must not have the heart of a petty person. These were all his comprehensions over the past 10 years, and regardless of whether Ling Han understood or not, he poured them all out in one go. Ling Han, on the other hand, became more and more astonished. His cultivation level had dropped, but his comprehension of martial art was still that of a former heaven-tier elite. Naturally, he could completely understand Mo Gao's description. It was precisely because he understood that he was so astonished. Mo Gao's understanding of the way of the sword had completely surpassed his own cultivation level. Even if he had not reached the level of sword heart illumination, he was only a step away from grasping sword heart. The level of martial art was so backward, and he himself was only a mere 9th layer poly, yet he had already touched the edge of sword heart. How could this not shock Ling Han? When Mo Gao finished speaking, Ling Han stood still, digesting what he had just heard. For a swordsman, this kind of explanation was priceless. This was not a sword technique, nor was it a martial arts technique as high as heaven grade or earth grade. It was only a kind of understanding and elaboration of the way of the sword, yet it was close to the source and reached straight to the essence. Of course, even if one had formed sword heart, what each swordsman grasped would not be the same, because sword heart was every swordsman's understanding of the way of the sword. However, listening to this kind of explanation for Ling Han, who had only formed 5 flashes of sword chi, was too much of a help. It was equivalent to paving a golden path in front of him, guiding him forward. Hunyao instantly felt bored, and used her hands to scratch her ears, looking very sleepy. Hey! Ling Han suddenly leaped up, the sword at his waist unsheathed, and quickly turned and danced. 5 flashes of sword chi crisscrossed. Shwa shwa shwa, a cold light flashed. However, after a while, another needle-like sword chi actually formed and joined the 5 flashes of sword chi. The 6th flash of sword chi. This flash of sword chi very quickly strengthened, becoming longer, thicker, and finally no different from the other 5 flashes of sword chi. Many thanks, teacher. Ling Han clasped his hands in thanks towards Mo Gao. This was not as simple as forming 1 flash of sword chi. He would benefit from Mo Gao's understanding for the rest of his life. If he could grasp sword heart in this life, then Mo Gao's previous explanation would at least save him half the time. He really did not think that coming to Huyang Academy was only to make Ling Dongxing happy, but he would actually gain such an unexpected benefit. He had profited greatly. Chapter 105. Mo Gao was similarly shocked. In his mind, a student that would be given to him must have entered through the back door, and had no future to develop, so he would waste time following him. Previously, he had spoken so much, but rather than saying that he was teaching Ling Han, it was more like he had been bored for too long, and wanted to pour out his heart's content. As for whether Ling Han could understand or not, he did not consider it at all. He never thought that Ling Han would really understand, and after digesting it, he very quickly formed a flash of sword chi. If it was only 1 flash of sword chi, he could accept it, but the problem was Ling Han originally had 5 flashes of sword chi. 5 flashes of sword chi, what kind of concept was that? 3 flashes of sword chi could make one a ruler, and 5 flashes was a small accomplishment. He was definitely a genius and possibly surpassed any of his peers in Rain Country, but why would such a genius be given to him to teach? Mo Gao really could not understand, but on second thought he was very happy because Ling Han was now his student. In the future, the higher his student's achievements, the more glory he would have. Teacher, there are some things I don't quite understand. Ling Han sheathed his sword, and asked Mo Gao for guidance. In terms of comprehension of martial art, he could be Mo Gao's grandmaster, but in terms of comprehension of sword arts, Mo Gao was above him. Firstly, Mo Gao had immersed himself in sword arts for more than 10 years, and secondly, he was indeed a genius in sword arts. If there's anything you don't understand, feel free to ask, Mo Gao immediately said. It had been more than 10 years, and when had he ever been consulted by a student? Ling Han asked some questions, and Mo Gao immediately explained according to his own understanding. In the process, he was greatly enlightened. One had to know that although Ling Han did not spend much time on sword arts, the knowledge of a heaven-tier warrior was there for all to see, and the questions he asked all pointed to the core. Mo Gao kept saying yeah. Oh, and his eyes grew brighter and brighter. He scratched his ears and cheeks, looking like he could not contain his joy. Unknowingly, it was already noon. He let out a long sigh and said, "Your natural talent in the sword Dao is even higher than mine, and I don't have the face to be your teacher. How about this? We'll be friends of the same generation and discuss each other." Ling Han shook his head and said, "In terms of sword Dao, Teacher Mo is indeed qualified to be my teacher. Even if I surpass Teacher Mo in sword Dao in the future, I will never forget Teacher Mo's kindness in teaching me today." Mo Gao sighed with emotion. To think that he would actually encounter such a talented student. Unfortunately, he did not have the qualifications to take Ling Han as his disciple. The relationship between teacher and student was only formed because of the academy. Hungry, Hunyo said pitifully as she pulled on Ling Han's clothes. Okay. Let's go eat." Ling Han excused himself from Mo Gao and left the academy. He randomly found a restaurant, ordered a sumptuous meal, and ate with Hunyo. He had to be fast enough to eat with this little girl. Otherwise, the dishes would be gone in 2 or 3 bites. A single meal actually cost over 1,000 silver coins, causing Ling Han to exclaim that he had no money to spend. This was because the imperial city's expenses were high enough, and the little girl had too much of a glutton. He had to concoct alchemical pills to earn money. Otherwise, it would be difficult just to feed Hunyo, not to mention buy materials to cultivate. It couldn't be helped. He had just arrived in the imperial city yesterday, and there were 1,000 things waiting to be done. Everything had to start from scratch. Ling Han held Hunyo's small hand, asked a few people on the way, and found Tianyiji. As expected of the imperial city's Tianyiji, merely a flight of over 1,000 steps was enough to make one gasp in amazement. It was 100 meters wide and slanted all the way up. At a height of 300 meters, there stood a large hall that was incomparably magnificent. Ling Han and Hunyo followed the steps into Tianyiji. The moment they entered, they saw a maidservant who was a sales guide come up to greet them. Her appearance was very sweet, and she said, "Customer, hello? My name is Xiaoying. What alchemical pills do you need?" "I don't need alchemical pills, I only need some materials," Ling Han said with a smile. "Customer, what kind of materials do you need?" Xiaoying asked again. Ling Han listed out the materials he needed. Xiaoying was obviously well trained, as she memorized the names and quantities of the materials, and even listed out the price of each material. "Customer, the total is 320,000 silver coins," Xiaoying said with a smile. Tianyiji mainly relied on concocting pills to earn money. As for the materials, unless they were especially precious such as the second star grass, the price would only be slightly higher than the cost. Thus, although this was a big deal, Tianyiji did not earn much, so the commission she could get would naturally not be much. 320,000 Ling Han sighed. He only had a little over 100,000 on him, which was far from enough. But he also wanted to concoct the second star pill as soon as possible, so he said, "Please go and inform Fu Yuansheng that Ling Han is looking for him." "Fuang, Lord Pavilion Master." Xiaoying was startled for a moment, and then came to a sudden realization. She was so shocked that she could not even speak coherently. How high and mighty was the Lord Pavilion Master? Aside from the Rain Emperor, there was no one else in the whole of Rain Country who had a higher status than the Lord Pavilion Master. Even the clan heads of the 8 great clans could only sit on equal footing with the Lord Pavilion Master. A young man asking to see the Lord Pavilion Master naturally put her in a difficult position. There was no reason for her to go and inform him. "It's fine. You only have to tell him that I am Ling Han, and I believe Fu Yuansheng will reward you," Ling Han said with a smile. That was natural. He, the Alchemy Emperor, had personally come, so Fu Yuansheng would definitely be overjoyed. Xiaoying would not believe it. After all, Ling Han was only a young man of 17 or 18 years old, so how could he possibly be acquainted with the Lord Pavilion Master? Even if the clan heads of the 8 great clans came personally, whether they would meet or not would depend on the mood of the Lord Pavilion Master. However, in the training that she had received, not offending a guest was the #1 priority. Thus she excused herself and said, "With my status, it is impossible for me to meet the Lord Pavilion Master. Please wait a moment, guest." Allow me to go and report to the person in charge. Ling Han naturally would not make things difficult for her, so he nodded and sat down at the side. Hu Niu followed suit, climbing onto Ling Han's lap and also sitting down with a serious expression. After a while, Xiaoying could be seen walking over behind a man who looked to be in his 40s, looking a little panicked. Brat, so you are the one who wants to see the Lord Pavilion Master? The middle-aged man looked at Ling Han with disdain in his eyes. He had already heard from Xiaoying what had happened earlier. Before he came, Ling Han was definitely short of money, and that was why he had deliberately said that he was acquainted with the Lord Pavilion Master, wanting to use this kind of method to bargain. He was really too naive. Ling Han frowned and said, "Be more polite with your words. If you have no money, then you have no money. What are you pretending to be capable for?" The middle-aged man humphed, then laughed loudly and said, "If you know the Lord Pavilion Master, I will eat this table." He pointed at a long table at the side. Ling Han revealed a smile and said, "I had not thought that you would actually have such a hobby. If I did not satisfy you, I would be too unreasonable." Full of nonsense, the middle-aged man said coldly. Chapter 106. Manager Yun. Xiaoying whispered to the middle-aged man. Tianyi had its own rules. One could not be rude to a guest. This was written in the first rule. The middle-aged man glanced at Xiaoying in displeasure, waved his hand and said, "Men, chase this pauper out." Xiaoying did not dare to say anything, and only looked sympathetically at Ling Han and Hu Niu. This middle-aged man's name was Yuan Gang, and he used to be a servant here. He did not think that his younger brother would suddenly advance to become a yellow-grade middle-level alchemist a few months ago, causing Yuan Gang's status to rise, and he became a small manager. Because he had not achieved his ambitions for a long time, now that he was in a high position, Yuan Gang became extremely arrogant, always thinking of ways to show off his superiority. Ling Han was very unlucky, and just happened to be in this guy's crosshairs. Two burly men walked over and stood behind Ling Han. One of them said, "Guest, please follow us out." Ling Han sighed. Did he really have to use violence? Ling Han. At this moment, a sweet voice was heard from behind. Ling Han turned around and saw that the other party was actually Qi Zhantai. Why had this seventh princess of the royal house of the Deyuan king come all the way here? Moreover, it turned out that Zhu He Xian and Zhang Weishan had also come. Then it was only natural that this girl had come along. Yo, who would have thought that this pauper would have such a beautiful wife? Yuan Gang looked envious, then said to Ling Han, "Pauper, let me play with your wife for a night, and I'll give you a 20% discount. How about haha?" Pa! His face was instantly slapped, and he staggered, falling to the ground. The one who had slapped him was obviously Ling Han. "Bastard, you actually dared to hit me." Yuan Gang crawled up, his face filled with rage. "What, you can't hit me?" Zhang Weishan laughed coldly as he walked over. "What are you?" Yuan Gang didn't even think, and immediately pointed a finger in front of Zhang Weishan's face. What? He let out a cry of surprise, because there was a silver badge hanging on Zhang Weishan's chest. Perhaps some people might not recognize him, but it was definitely not him, the old man who had worked in Tianyi for more than 10 years. Black-grade low-level alchemist, my lord. He hurriedly bent his knees and bowed, his face full of fawning. He had relied on his younger brother to sit in the position of minor manager, but his younger brother was only a yellow-grade middle-level alchemist, while the other was a black-grade low-level alchemist. They were not on the same level at all. "Master, this guy is really bad," Qi Zhantai immediately said. Puff Yuan Gang immediately spluttered. This beauty was actually the disciple of a black-grade alchemist, and he had actually dared to flirt with her just now. Was he seeking his own death? He scowled miserably and said, "Miss, look at this foul mouth of mine. I only know how to spout nonsense. I deserve a beating. He began to slap himself across the face. Young friend Ling. Zhu He Xian also walked over, and together with Zhang Weishan, she clasped her hands in greeting towards Ling Han. "Ma, Grandmaster Zhu." Yuan Gang had only just noticed Zhu He Xian, and could not help but turn pale with fright. Unlike Zhang Weishan, who had always been stationed in Deyuan City, Zhu Hexian had always been in the imperial city, so how could he not recognize her? But two black-grade alchemists were actually greeting Ling Han together, so how could he not turn pale with fright? You've come at just the right time. Help me call Fu Yuansheng over, Ling Han said with a smile. Zhu Hexian glanced at Yuan Gang and said, young friend Ling, there is no need to trouble the pavilion master to deal with this kind of vile character, right? He was a black-grade low-level alchemist, and dealing with a minor manager was only a matter of opening his mouth. Grandmaster Zhu, I have eyes but failed to see. Yuan Gang hurriedly begged for mercy, but after saying this, he knew that the main culprit of this matter was Ling Han, so he hurriedly turned around and said, young Master Ling, please be magnanimous and spare me this once. You've forgotten we still have a bet between us. Ling Han said with a smile, Grandmaster Zhu, help me inform Fu Yuansheng and ask him to come over. Young Master Ling. Zhu Hexian took a step forward and said in a small voice, you know Grandmaster Fu? I do. Help me call him over. I have something to discuss with him. Ling Han nodded. Then I'll immediately call him over for young Master Ling. Zhu Hexian said hurriedly and turned to leave. After a while, Zhu Hexian and Fu Yuansheng were seen walking over quickly, one after the other. Of course it was Fu Yuansheng who was walking in front. Haha, young Master Han has arrived. Please forgive me for not coming out to greet you, Fu Yuansheng said hurriedly. Yuan Gang's face turned even paler. So not only was Zhu Hexian extremely respectful to Ling Han, even Fu Yuansheng was very respectful to Ling Han. Where did this brat come from? He was too awesome, wasn't he? Ling Han smiled at Fu Yuansheng, then turned to Yuan Gang and said, I win this bet, right? Of course young Master Ling wins. Yuan Gang changed his tune, his face full of flattery. Ling Han nodded and said, all right, you can eat now. Ah! Yuan Gang was instantly tongue-tied. What, you still want me to add some seasonings to cook it? Do you want to braise it or steam it? Ling Han said with a smile. Young Master Ling really knows how to joke, Yuan Gang said awkwardly. I joke with my friends but you're not my friend, Ling Han said calmly. What's going on here? Fu Yuansheng interrupted, his tone already filled with strong displeasure. He and Wu Songlin had both received guidance from Ling Han the day before, giving them hope of breaking through to Earth-grade alchemists. To them, Ling Han could even be considered half a master. Now that Ling Han was obviously expressing his displeasure, he was naturally very unhappy. It was not appropriate for him to ask Ling Han, nor would he ask Yuan Gang, so he turned his gaze to Xiaoying. Yuan Gang instantly signaled Xiaoying with his eyes, hoping that she would be merciful in her words and say a few good words for him. But Xiaoying acted as if she had not seen him, and recounted everything that had happened just now. Fu Yuansheng was furious, and pointed at Yuan Gang's nose as he said, how dare you? You can even speak for me. Since you said it yourself, then eat. Yuan Gang's face twitched violently. This time, it was a pavilion master of Rain Country's Tianyi who had spoken, and even the current Rain Emperor had to give him face. Come, he had to eat today even if he didn't want to. But how could he eat in front of a table? He braced himself, tore off a table leg and began chewing on it. Kacha, he was in the 9th layer of body refining tier, so his teeth and strength were not weak. Chewing the table leg to pieces was nothing difficult. When the other employees arrived, they all snickered. Yuan Gang was a scoundrel, and there were many who were not used to his style. It was just that they did not dare to openly oppose him. Now that it was his turn to suffer, they were naturally happy to watch the show. Ling Han, however, was not interested in Yuan Gang eating the entire table. He said to Fu Yuansheng, it's better to dismiss this kind of person. This little girl is not bad. Let her take over the vacant position. I will listen to young Master Han's arrangements. Fu Yuansheng was very humble. Xiaoying instantly looked overjoyed, and her gaze towards Ling Han was filled with gratitude. Chapter 107. Oh. Ling Han only needed to think for a moment to guess the crux of the matter. Li Hao was able to enter Huyang Academy, and would definitely have a bright future. The Zhu clan was worried that Li Hao would have a change of heart after experiencing the extravagant lifestyle of the imperial city, so they allowed Zhu Shui to follow him. However, this couple seemed to have already broken through that layer of window paper, and their relationship was already ripe. Ling Han nodded internally, feeling happy for them. Big brother Ling, I've been looking for you ever since I entered the academy, but I haven't been able to find you, Li Hao said a little guiltily. Ling Han laughed loudly and teased, you probably didn't spend too much time with Shui Yi. That's why you haven't been able to find me, right? Li Hao's face instantly flushed red. In the past, he and Zhu Shui only had a hazy feeling for each other, and neither of them had pointed it out. After arriving at the imperial city, they were a single man and a single woman, and they had also left their hometown, so naturally their feelings for each other had increased greatly, and they wanted nothing more than to stick together at all times. Big brother Ling, you only know how to tease people, Zhu Shui said coquettishly, helping Li Hao to dispel the awkwardness. Ling Han smiled. Li Hao was a little stiff while Zhu Shui was much more flexible. The two of them complemented each other perfectly. Popper. It was at this moment that they heard a soft voice of surprise from behind them, and a young man walked quickly towards them. It was actually the young master of the Kong clan. When he saw Ling Han, he could not help but smirk coldly, and said, what a coincidence to actually let me meet you here. He had been swindled out of 100 silver coins by Ling Han, and this bit of money was naturally nothing to him. More importantly, he was very displeased. However, later on, Suku Xan had barged in, so he did not have the time to settle the score with Ling Han. Young Master Kong, who is this guy? A gorgeously dressed woman came over and leaned into the arms of the young master of the Kong clan. Her eyes flirtatious. Oh, he's just a pauper. The young master of the Kong clan waved his hand, appearing extremely disdainful. Who are you calling a pauper? Li Hao was young and hot-blooded, so he could not help but retort. The young master of the Kong clan swept his gaze over Li Hao and Zhu Shui, and instantly revealed an expression of disdain as he said, you two must have just arrived in the imperial city recently? How do you know? Li Hao blurted out. Haha, you two look like country bumpkins, so you must have run out from some rural backwater. The expression of disdain on the young master of the Kong clan's face became even more pronounced. His eyes were fixed on Zhu Shui as he said, however, this country bumpkin girl is quite pretty. If she were to dress herself up properly, she might have a bit of fun. Bullshit. How could Li Hao allow his lover to be humiliated? He immediately raised his fist and punched towards the young master of the Kong clan. Ah! The bewitching woman immediately screamed. Go to one side and wait. The young master of the Kong clan pushed the bewitching woman to one side, and with a wave of his hands charged towards Li Hao. Pung pung pung, the two of them began to fight. Li Hao was in the 4th layer of element gathering tier, while the young master of the Kong clan was in the 5th layer of element gathering tier. In theory he should be stronger, but it was obvious that he had been pushed to this level by various resources. His foundation in martial arts was not stable at all, and his battle prowess was only limited to 4 stars. Thus, the two of them ended up in a tie. For a moment the battle was intense, and neither of them had the upper hand. Ha ha ha, who would have thought that a country bumpkin would have some ability? The young master of the Kong clan laughed and said, country bumpkin, how about lending your woman to me to play with for a few days? Don't think that you're losing out. Under my guidance, your woman will be able to learn a lot of techniques, and let a country bumpkin like you have a taste of something new. Hearing him insult his woman once again, Li Hao's eyes turned red. In a fit of rage, he drew his saber and slashed towards the young master of the Kong clan. You brat, you dare to use a weapon against me? The young master of the Kong clan humphed, and similarly drew his sword, beginning to clash with Li Hao. Li Hao roared in rage and finally unleashed his saber chi. Like a furious dragon, it danced towards the young master of the Kong clan. The young master of the Kong clan had forcibly advanced to the 5th layer of element gathering tier, so how could he possibly be able to withstand the saber chi? Instantly, a panicked expression appeared on his face. In just 2 or 3 moves, a few wounds had already appeared on his body from the saber chi, causing him to cry out in pain. Stop! Stop! He exclaimed in shock and hurriedly stopped the battle. He was not a man with a strong will. Apologize. Li Hao sheathed his saber and shouted at the young master of the Kong clan. The young master of the Kong clan's face was livid. asking him to apologize to a country bumpkin. If others found out about this, where would his face be? But this country bumpkin was obviously a rash brat, and if he resisted forcefully, it was very possible that he would suffer a calamity. He was just about to temporarily lower his head when his eyes swept over the surroundings. Instantly, a joyful expression appeared on his face, and he said, "Big Brother Tan, save me." A tall and slender young man was walking slowly towards him. His appearance was handsome, and every movement he made exuded a strong sense of confidence. His name was Tan Wei-chi, and he was a member of the younger generation of a mid-level clan in the Imperial City. In the Imperial City, there were only 8 great clans, and they all needed to have a powerful warrior of spiritual pedestal tier to keep watch. There were many more mid-level clans, because they only needed a powerful warrior of spiritual ocean tier to keep watch. At least, there were even more small clans, and only a warrior of gushing spring tier was enough. For example, though the young master of the Kong clan was respectfully addressed as young master, in truth, he was only from a small clan. However, the Kong clan had been in business for generations, and though they had not produced many powerful warriors, their clan was well off, and they were even wealthier than many mid-level clans. Thus, the young master of the Kong clan was acquainted with a considerable number of young masters from mid-level clans. This was also his capital. At first, Tan Wei-chi did not recognize the young master of the Kong clan, because the latter was currently in a very sorry state. He only managed to recognize him after taking a closer look. He could not help but be surprised and said, "Kong Wenhui." "Big Brother Tan, it's me," Kong Wenhui said with a long face. "Why are you in such a sorry state?" Tan Wei-chi could not help but laugh, because he had discovered that Kong Wenhui's opponent was only in the 4th layer of element gathering tier. Kong Wenhui glared fiercely at Li Hao and said, "It's this country bumpkin. Just because he has formed a flash of saber chi, he actually dares to act so arrogantly in the Imperial City." Tan Wei-chi swept his gaze over Li Hao's body, and could not help but reveal a look of disdain. He could naturally tell with one glance that this was an outsider. That country bumpkin aura was practically overwhelming. As a member of a great clan of the Imperial City, whether it was Kong Wenhui or Tan Wei-chi, they both had a natural sense of pride, and could not tolerate people who came from other places. "Country bumpkin, kneel down and kowtow in apology." Tan Wei-chi did not ask how the two of them had gotten into a conflict, and immediately spoke in a menacing tone to Li Hao. Of course he would not have any misgivings. He was only a country bumpkin, so what kind of background could he have in the Imperial City? Li Hao did not dare to be the slightest bit careless. The pressure that this person gave him was far greater than that of Kong Wenhui. At the very least, his cultivation level was in the late stage of element gathering tier. His saber chi could barely increase his battle prowess by 1 battle star, but it would definitely not be able to match an opponent in the 7th layer of element gathering tier. Unless Tan Wei-chi was also a fake like Kong Wenhui, who only had an empty cultivation level, a mere martial artist in the 4th layer of element gathering tier, I would be able to suppress him with a single finger. Tan Wei-chi humped coldly, and said proudly, "I am in the 9th layer of element gathering tier." Li Hao's expression changed greatly. Even if his opponent was also a fake 9th layer of element gathering tier, would still have battle prowess of 7 battle stars, and still be able to completely suppress him. "Brother Hao, forget it," Zhu Shui said as she moved closer. His opponent was too strong, and with Ling Han's ability, although he did not have to fear martial artists in the 9th layer of element gathering tier, this was the Imperial City after all, and who knew what kind of background each and every one of them had. Chapter 108. Fu Yuanshang's expression changed again and again, and finally turned into a long sigh. He said, "Though this person is a bit arrogant, he has considerable talent in alchemy. I originally wanted to gift him an opportunity, but who would have thought so?" He raised his clasped hands at Ling Han, and said, "Young Master Han, please don't take it to heart." Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "It's fine." This time he did not want to pursue the matter further because of Fu Yuanshang, but if that He Lin dared to be arrogant again, he would definitely beat all of his teeth out. "Then let's begin." Fu Yuanshang had already retrieved the medicinal ingredients that Ling Han needed, and Ling Han had also retrieved the second star grass. Everyone here was a black-grade alchemist, so how could they not recognize the second star grass? A few of them instantly looked furious. They were actually asked to observe a junior concoct a refreshing pill. This was practically an insult to them. However, they did not have a black-grade high-level alchemist as their father, so even if they were displeased with Fu Yuansheng, they did not dare to say it out loud. However, the expressions on their faces were naturally difficult. In their eyes, Zhu Hexian and Zhang Weishan both had the urge to draw their weapons and chase them out. They actually dared to doubt young Master Han. And Zhang Weishan even felt a bit ashamed, because he had also doubted Ling Han previously. Ling Han did not care what others thought. With his status as the Alchemy Emperor, did he need the respect of other alchemists? He picked up the alchemy furnace and began to throw the medicinal ingredients into it. Does this brat actually know alchemy? How could he put in so many medicinal ingredients at once? That's right, the first step of alchemy is purification, and different medicinal ingredients require different temperatures for purification. Putting them together would only cause them to be destroyed. Forget it, just treat it as a waste of time. A few alchemists could not help but whisper amongst themselves. It was not that they did not believe Fu Yuansheng, but that Ling Han was really too young and too reckless. Not to mention them, even Fu Yuansheng, Zhu Hexian, and Zhang Weishan were extremely shocked, because purifying the medicinal ingredients was the first step of concocting pills, and it was also an extremely important step. Could it be that Ling Han was going to mess it up the moment he started? It was a pity that Li Xichan wasn't here. She had seen the entire process of Ling Han's alchemy. Purification was a piece of cake for her. After putting in the 7 medicinal ingredients, Ling Han's hands shook, and flames surged out. His figure began to circle around the alchemy furnace, and he struck palm after palm onto the alchemy furnace. Buzz buzz buzz. Buzz 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 buzz. Immediately, hot air rushed out of the furnace, and the fragrance of the medicine floated out. What? All the alchemists present widened their eyes in disbelief. It was as if they had seen a ghost. Master, what's wrong? Qi Zhantai asked in confusion. She had just entered the world of alchemy, and had only learned some theoretical knowledge. She did not know what was so shocking about this. Heavens, 7 medicinal ingredients can actually be purified at the same time. Am I dreaming? Before Zhang Weishan could reply, someone exclaimed in shock. These 7 medicinal ingredients require different temperatures to be purified. Originally, it was impossible to concoct them all at the same time, but this brat used a miraculous technique. It was as if he had split the pill furnace into 7 parts, and the temperature of each part was different. This allowed the 7 medicinal ingredients to be purified at the same time. Impressive! These people slowly came to their senses, and their faces were filled with undisguised admiration. However, this doesn't seem to have much meaning. After a while, an alchemist said hesitantly. After all, he could not do it, so his evaluation was not very convincing. Indeed. Even Fu Yuansheng nodded. Purifying 7 medicinal ingredients at the same time. Although this ability is shocking, purifying the medicinal ingredients separately will only waste a little more time. He gave his evaluation. This was what it meant to be flashy but not practical. Because purifying 7 medicinal ingredients at the same time, one mistake would mean wasting 7 portions of medicinal ingredients. That's not right. Fu Yuansheng suddenly shook his head, his eyes widening. Why is this medicinal fragrance so thick? Reminded by him, the others also came to a sudden realization, and revealed expressions of shock. As black-grade alchemists, they had purified medicinal ingredients countless times, and were very familiar with the medicinal ingredients that were commonly used. But smelling this medicinal fragrance, it was obviously different from the ones they purified. The thicker the medicinal fragrance, the purer the extracted medicinal ingredient essence, and the higher the success rate when concocting the pill later. It was very simple. The fewer the impurities, the less interference. But the problem was for black-grade alchemists like them, they had already reached the pinnacle of purification, and it was already impossible for them to have the slightest bit of improvement. So why was it that the essence of the medicinal ingredients that Ling Han had extracted was purer than theirs? Could it be that this is because he purified 7 medicinal ingredients at the same time? That's the only way to understand it. That's right, I heard from a senior that in ancient times, There was a great alchemist who purified many medicinal ingredients at the same time. Using the interaction between the ingredients, he could make the extracted medicinal ingredients even purer. Could it be that this is actually true? This time, everyone could no longer remain calm. Purifying medicinal ingredients faster or slower was not a big deal, and no one cared about that little bit of time. But to be able to increase the purity of medicinal ingredients, that was shocking and had an incomparably huge value. They all secretly sighed in pity, because they had previously thought that there was no point in doing this, and they had missed out on many of Ling Han's techniques. Thankfully, Ling Han still had many medicinal ingredients with him, so he would obviously continue. The 9 of them stared with wide eyes, not daring to miss any of Ling Han's movements. Qi Zhantai, on the other hand, became bored, but there were too many important people here, so she did not even dare to breathe too loudly. Ling Han was completely focused, and after purifying all the medicinal ingredients one by one, he began to concoct the second star pill. The technique he used was called the Four-Form Seal, and was extremely effective in controlling fire. In his last life, this control technique was also quite impressive, and was widely known in the world of alchemy. Because he had been an alchemist in his last life, Ling Han could not bear to see alchemy wither away. Thus, he did not mind passing on some appropriate knowledge of alchemy to raise the level of alchemy in this life. As he concocted the pill, he explained the key points of the Four-Form Seal. Including Fu Yuanshang, every alchemist was like a beginner, listening attentively, their faces filled with awe. If outsiders were here, they would definitely go crazy. It could be said that the most awesome alchemists of Rain Country were all here, yet they were all seriously observing a young man concocting alchemical pills. There was no seniority in learning, and those who were capable were the teachers. When Ling Han finished concocting the second star pill, the 9 alchemists were all immersed in the Four-Form Seal, unable to extricate themselves. All of them sat cross-legged on the ground, sometimes looking pensive, sometimes stretching out their hands to clap. They were all trying their best to digest the explanation that Ling Han had just given them. Let's go eat some meat." Ling Han smiled faintly and picked up Hunyo. There was a satisfied expression on his face. This time he had concocted 7 second star pills, which would allow his divine sense to grow considerably. Hunyo instantly became happy. Eating was her favorite thing to do. "I'll go too," Qi Zhantai quickly said. She was really too bored. Chapter 109. Ling Han carried Hunyo and exited the room with Qi Zhantai. However, Fu Yuanshang was a powerful warrior of spiritual pedestal tier after all. When the 3 of them exited the room, he immediately realized and hurriedly leapt out the door, saying, "Young Master Han, you're leaving? And the mission is complete, so of course I'm leaving." Ling Han shook the 7 second star pills that had already been stored in the pill bottle, looking very satisfied. "Allow me to see young Master Han off," Fu Yuanshang said in a sincere tone. He had already been completely convinced by Ling Han's alchemy skills. Ling Han smiled and nodded. If he wanted to see him off, then let him. They went downstairs, and just as they reached the staircase, a servant came up to them and said, "Pavilion Master, the 3rd Imperial Prince requests an audience." "Oh." Fu Yuanshang paused, then said, "I was just about to go down, so you don't have to worry about me." "Yes." The servant quickly nodded. Only then did he arrive at Ling Han and Qi Zhantai. He could not help but be speechless, because it was actually Fu Yuanshang who was leading the way, which made him extremely shocked. Fu Yuanshang, one of the few people with the highest status in Rain Country. The 3 of them arrived at the ground floor, and saw a young man and woman waiting there. Both of them stood straight, without any hint of impatience on their faces. The man and woman were about 25 or 26 years old. The man was tall and had thick hair. His eyes were bright and full of penetrating power. It was as if he could see through anyone's innermost secrets with just a glance. The woman's figure was voluptuous and alluring, enough to make one drool. Her beautiful face was like a flower, her skin like white jade, and her hair was crimson red like fire, giving her a different kind of allure. This man was naturally the 3rd Imperial Prince, Qi Fengyun. But who was this woman? Ling Han was a little surprised, because this woman was also in Gushing Spring tier. In a small place like Rain Country, a martial artist in gushing spring tear below 30 years old was indeed quite shocking, and could definitely be considered a genius. Pavilion Master. The third imperial prince clasped his hands in greeting. Putting aside the fact that he was only an imperial prince now, even if he inherited the throne in future, he still had to be polite to Fu Yuanshang. Zhantai greets third imperial brother. Qi Zhantai also bowed and paid her respects to the third imperial prince. All right, wait here for a moment. I'll send this esteemed guest off. Fu Yuansheng nodded at the third prince. A distinguished guest, the third imperial prince's gaze involuntarily turned towards Ling Han, because there were only 3 people behind Fu Yuansheng. Qi Zhantai was from the royal family of the Da Yuan king, so naturally she was not worthy of such treatment from Fu Yuansheng, and Hu Niu was too young. What was the background of this young man that Fu Yuansheng could treat as an honored guest and personally see him off? Strange, he clearly had all the intelligence of the entire imperial city, so how could such an awesome character suddenly appear out of nowhere? Pavilion Master, please go ahead, he hurriedly said. Fu Yuansheng sent Ling Han to the door and earnestly invited Ling Han to visit frequently. Only after that did he turn around and leave. He seemed to be in a hurry because he was also in a hurry to study the 4 images seal. Ling Han and Qi Zhantai walked side by side, while Hu Niu waved her little hands excitedly and said, "Meet, meet, meet. Brother." The third imperial prince caught up to them. Ling Han stopped in his tracks, walked towards him and asked, "What's the matter? Didn't this imperial prince have some business with Fu Yuansheng? Why had he suddenly appeared?" The answer was very simple. A character that even Fu Yuansheng had to respectfully send off had suddenly appeared in the imperial city, so as the third imperial prince, he naturally had to get to know him at first notice. One had to know that the current reign emperor had a total of 17 sons, and there were at least 5 who were qualified to compete for the throne. The third imperial prince would naturally make friends with those with talent, so that he could accumulate enough strength to fight for the throne in the future. "I am Qi Fengyun. Dare I ask for brother's name?" The third imperial prince appeared to be very polite. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, Ling Han. "Brother Ling, I still have important matters to attend to, so it is not convenient for me to discuss them in detail now. Please accept this item, Brother Ling. I believe that in this imperial city, most people will give Brother Ling face on this item." The third imperial prince handed over an item. It was a violet-shaped badge. "Thank you." Ling Han did not stand on ceremony, and accepted the badge. "Brother Ling, after I have dealt with some trivial matters, I will definitely look for Brother Ling for a chat," the third imperial prince said with clasped hands, and hurriedly left with the beautiful woman. Ling Han smiled as he weighed the badge in his hand, and put it away in his pocket. "Ling Han, this is a token of the third imperial prince. It is said that if you hold this item, you don't even have to pay to eat or stay in the imperial city. All the expenses will be covered by the third imperial prince," Qi Zhantai said enviously. Ling Han was slightly startled, and then suddenly laughed loudly. Qi Zhantai felt that this was strange, and naturally asked for more details. "I think that this third imperial prince will definitely regret it," Ling Han said. "Why?" "Because there is a real glutton here." Ling Han rubbed Hu Niu's head. Qi Zhantai still did not understand. She was just a little girl, so even if she ate from day to night, how much could she possibly eat? "There are really good people in this world," Ling Han said ruefully. The 3 of them went to a restaurant to eat. After witnessing Hu Niu's terrifying appetite, Qi Zhantai finally began to worry for that brother of hers. Qi Fengyun might really be eaten until he went broke by Hu Niu. Huyang University, Feng Luo's residence. "Bastard, bastard, bastard." Wei Hilu paced back and forth in his room like a madman, his eyes bloodshot, and he looked extremely manic. He stopped and said to Feng Luo, Do you believe that Headmaster Wu actually expelled me from the alchemy department?" The corner of Feng Luo's mouth twitched a few times. This was not the first time that Wei Hilu had complained to him. He counted in his heart, and it should have been 37 or 38 times already. Previously, he would still play along and comfort Wei Hilu a little, but now he had completely lost the mood to do so. Having lost the importance of Wu Songlin, a mere yellow-grade low-level alchemist naturally would not be of much importance to him. "It's all because of that bastard, that goddamn brat." Wei Li's eyes were about to spit fire. He had once been extremely glorious, with the halo of an alchemy genius. Even the descendants of the nobles and the imperial family would be polite when they saw him, but now it was as if he had fallen straight from the sky, his future bleak. What alchemist would dare to take someone that Wu Songlin had chased away as a disciple? And alchemy was most particular about inheritance. How could one achieve anything by relying on one's own ability? In other words, he was completely done for. Feng Luo saw this, and his lips curled up in a cold smile. He said, "Young Master Wei, I have an idea that can ruthlessly punish that brat Ling Han." Quite a few of his teeth had been knocked out, and his words were now leaking air. He needed to listen carefully to understand what he was saying. Oh, what idea? Wei Lu immediately turned around. He had practically lost everything, and had become extremely crazy. As long as he could take revenge on Ling Han, he was willing to do anything. Here it's this. Feng Luo took out a badge in the shape of a violet flower. What is this? Wei Lu could not help but be startled. This is the third imperial prince's keepsake. Feng Luo smiled very sinisterly. This was given to my brother by the third imperial prince. Tell me, if I say that this badge was lost, but was found in Ling Han's residence, how would the academy deal with him? And what would the third imperial prince's reaction be? Wei Li's eyes lit up and he understood. Planting slander was more refreshing.